The meeting of the Planning Commission of December 13th, Friday, unfortunately, will come to order, please. Mr. Secretary, would you like to call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Trunzo.
Here.
Mr. Covington.
Here.
Mr. Hunker.
Here.
Ms. Matcha.
Here.
Ms. Lucille.
She's absent this week.
Mr. Strange.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
And Mr. Parrott.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. And do you have the verification of meeting notice?
The agenda for the Planning Commission regular meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on December 6th. And the agenda notice was sent out from the city portal on December 6th. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And I understand we don't have any minutes to approve. Is that correct? Okay. Any correspondence? No. Old business, we have none. New business, we don't have any. Before I get into the other business and the CDP discussion, I just want to, been wanting to do this for a while, and I think now is an appropriate time to congratulate one of our co-planning commissioners, Mr. Trunzo, who has been awarded a planning certificate for his participation in the Institute for Public Administration courses at Delaware University, and or the University of Delaware, I should say, I'm sorry. And, you know, I do know, as time was going on, that Jeff took this very seriously, and while we had initially been asked to try and attend, one of the series of courses that they had, Jeff took the initiative and attended the entire course. So I congratulate him for his devotion, and he has told me over quite some period of time how useful he found it. I'm glad that they recognized, his participation and awarded him the planning certificate. And Jeff, if you would like to say a few words about it.
I would. The program is very high quality, and people we know, like Glenn, are part of the faculty. And you get to network with people that are in planning positions all over Delaware, as well as the county. And I made several friends on the county staff and found that they are really hiring good people who really know how to do it, young people with fresh education and perspective. So it was pretty exciting, when we think about some of the problems that affect Rehoboth Beach that really are more of a county issue. Lest you think that I may not be that good of a person, because if you recall, the federal government was shut down. And I managed to get 3 classes in during the shutdown. And the city does reimburse for the cost of the classes, which are very minimal, so that's also a help too. But I got, in terms of having a foundation and learning which shiny objects not to be swayed by, I learned a lot. It's well worth it.
Can you share with us the time commitment, number of classes, and the structure of it?
Yeah, so they have a number of certificate programs. For planning, they required, it's either 5 or 6 classes. I'm not sure. I think it was 6 in total. So several were in the winter, and I think the last one I took was in June. They're in Dover. They're usually about 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours, 8 to 12, 9 to noon. And they're also on Fridays. So I was able to combine some, with an afternoon meeting here. I'll also mention that I know that Ann has a certificate from the same place in administration, I assume.
And also planning.
And planning. All right.
Good.
I didn't
we
know
didn't
that.
know that. We have some more work for you, Ann, just what you need.
Yeah, so I think I guess we're gonna make the announcement now, but I understand that the city manager is continuing to support Planning Commission members' participation and handles the reimbursement. So, we'll give you the website if you can go.
When do they start?
They start, when I looked a week ago, they hadn't announced the 2020 class schedule yet, but they said it's imminent. They plan to do it before the holidays.
And you'll let us know, right? I mean, you'll-
I can keep track of it, and I'll let everybody, yeah.
You can go online.
You can subscribe as an individual.
Yeah,
And they have like
either-
classes 101, like a 101 session to
Yeah.
start, then they go into the 2
201,
series,
right.
and they're starting to get into 3 series for those of us that took it 20 years ago. So it's nice because it's localized, and you see a lot of local people, and then there's some like litigation that he brings up, which is good.
And the group again is called, is what? What is the,
It's the University of Delaware, Biden School of Public Policy, Institute of Public Administration. I think I got it right.
Yes,
You
you
did.
did, yeah.
You did.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind sending around the link to all the members,
will.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, and congratulations again.
Thanks.
Next order of business is back to the Comprehensive Development Plan, and a continuation of our discussion of the survey results, and see how well we did on our homework. It was indeed a daunting task. I'm sure everyone found it to be. And found out some interesting things primarily from the narrative comments that were submitted. And I guess if I can just, and Debbie, hopefully, Debbie Field is here from KCI to assist us in going through this process. But if I could just jump ahead a little bit, I mentioned to Debbie that I sort of came up with an other category. And that was matters over which we have no control. The Planning Commission has no control. The city government has no control. But there were a lot of comments throughout the narrative survey responses that dealt with concerns about social classification, saying we need to keep Rehoboth a middle-income community, that a lot of the resources that are available are only for the wealthy, such as high-priced restaurants and things of that nature. And, while I think, those are all obviously concerns that people have, social issues such as that, class structure, are things that we don't have control over. And a lot of it is driven by other things that we don't have control over, like the cost of property. I think we would all admit that the cost of even a 50 by 100-foot lot in Rehoboth is very expensive. But that's a reality that we can't change. Cost of living is not something that we can change. How much net worth or income that people have who buy here or who come to stay here is not something we can change. That's just something out of our control. And so I hope that people will recognize that while, that we do have limitations on what we can address, and while there were a lot of very good comments and things that do need our consideration, I hope that, they'll understand that there are just certain things that are beyond our control.
Great,
Go ahead,
thank
Debbie.
you. What I want to do is, I'm going to jump around just a little bit before we get into some dialogue. So, as daunting as it was, you will see when you go through the survey, there's a theme with some participants that have the same common theme. There's other ones that are very opinionated, and other people that potentially aren't even in the city. So, target on the highway was, comments like that. So you take it with a grain of salt, like we talked about. So what we're trying to do is to figure out, the intent is to determine what topics that we may need more information on, more involvement on, and a better understanding to determine a path forward. So we know we need to kind of meld some of these into some topics. And some of these may involve collecting specialized data, bringing in representatives from the city, county, state organizations, as well as expert subject matters. So that's kind of the way we were steering this so we can move forward in the project. And we gave you 5 categories. So the one that Rick was talking about is really number 3 to a certain degree. Intergovernmental items. These areas are out of the city's jurisdiction in regard to ownership, regulations, and maintenance. And you might not know that until we get done. You might not know what is really within the purview of the city, the state, or the county. So this helps us educate people that feel the city has control of that. So if we're hearing comments like, let's just say traffic concern. Traffic concern on the Rehoboth Boulevard is a huge issue. And if the boulevard is, or the avenue is owned by the state, you can still be in a thorn in the side state, you can still have an opinion, you can still do a lot of stuff, but it's owned by somebody else, there's a jurisdictional issue. So I think categorizing these, like I said, this isn't gonna address all of the situations, but we want to have some topic dialogue with you. So if I get some topics, then we can categorize them. But in order for you to see the bigger picture before we get in the dialogue, I thought I'd walk through the platform. So there would be a real understanding of why we asked you to do this crazy exercise. So I'm gonna skip to the actual part, which is a platform exercise. Once we get these topics, we'd like to walk it through with input. It's called a workshop platform exercise. What's a topic? Well, you usually can't pick the topic until you know the subcategories. So if we pick the topic, hypothetically, connectivity. Some things that could fall under connectivity could be bicycle, public transportation, pedestrian, vehicle signage. So that's not limited. It could include more input, more categories from the Planning Commission, but I just wanted to walk you through kind of the platform of how we get your input. So if we have a topic workshop that's going to be titled connectivity, based on the things that we found people may have issues on, and we're going to walk through the bicycle one. So the category is bicycle. Some of the things we thought you might want to be able to present is, what's our existing infrastructure? Does everybody know where the safe bike routes are? Does everybody know where there's wider right-of-way, where the trails connect? What are some of the recent improvements that the city has made or the state has made? Let's educate the public on some of that and the Planning Commission for connectivity. What are some of the proposed improvements on the dockets for the state, for the city? What are their areas of concern? And when you're talking specifically about bicycle, some of your areas of concern could be pedestrian or bicycle versus motorized. It could be lighting, something as easy as lighting where you're not biking in areas that are highly lit. And it could be concerns of roadway maintenance, potholes, the roadway is eroding for stormwater, several different items. And then 5, who has the regulatory jurisdiction for some of the improvements that have to be made? And then is there any statistical data out there? Like Bike Delaware has statistical data on deaths, on incidents, accidents. And then we want to take it a step further. So this can get further. Where can we park our bikes? There's a lot of different topics. And then what are the partners that we can work with? What does Bike Delaware have? They have really good representation in the state. They're really good at what they do. What does DelDOT have? What do the users feel? How about any groups or organizations? The police department with bicycle, that's another good trigger. And local bicycle businesses. So we're kind of walking through the topics to say, if we had a workshop on connectivity, if we use bicycle as a one, what should we have as, just hypothetically, as a station? And then who should we invite to help us get the public involved and do a little bit of education and get a little bit more input in where we can do things when we get to your goals and objectives. So if the goal from the Planning Commission is to have all of our streets bike-friendly, additional right-of-way, the pie in the sky, that's what we want to do. What does it take to get there? So we need to find out what it takes to actually get to your goals. So this was one we just basically tried to work out. The next one's public transportation. I just want to walk you through another title in this so you kind of get where we're going, and then you can provide some input on these. So under connectivity, the second one we talked about was public transportation. This is another topic. And when we were kind of talking about public transportation, some unique things came up. The Jolly Trolley, the dock and boat transportation, valet. There's a lot of places when you get in an urban setting that will do a drop-off and pick-up designation and will do valet parking to maybe an area that has a parking lot, maybe not in the town limits or within the town limits. So is that options for businesses? Uber, Lyft, and taxi. So those are some other public transportation we want to look at. And then DART. So what are the partners there? So this can grow, but it helps to have the topic of connectivity. It helps to have the subtitles. And that's what we're trying to look at through the surveys and through your local knowledge. So then we can categorize maybe 4 to 6 workshops and how we can kind of move forward on those topics. If not, we get lost in talking about so much in the comp plan because it has such a wide spectrum of what you want to see in 10 years. It would help us to focus on workshops and get the right people into the right data and have those organized and in notifications in advance for everybody. So that's just what we were thinking. kind of before we go through the exercise, so you can see how it turns into something better, it turns into something you're gonna need in the process, versus what do people like, what don't they like. I think a lot of the comments, when you review them, we know a lot of the answers. Some of the comments are things that we can't control. Some of the comments are things that have been passed for 20 years, and maybe some people are still not happy with the results, or people are embracing new changes. You can tell tones very easy in writing. So I think what I'd like to do, and I'm gonna turn it kind of over to Rick to see the format, but what I'd like to do is, figure out how I can get this information back from you so we can start organizing some workshops and get your input on those workshops and move forward. So homework time.
Homework time. Thanks, Debbie. I think our goal here is to have as much participation by everybody up here as possible, and to get as much input and as varied input as we all have. I know you've all been working really hard, because I've heard from a number of you, about this, and so I think if we can get to whoever wants to volunteer first is certainly welcome to, in terms of going through their homework and putting out what they got from their analysis of the survey data, in terms of categories and perhaps some subcategories, as we did with public transportation and bicycle. We sort of went through those as general categories with subcategories under connectivity, and then came up with things that we felt were encompassed by that, as Debbie just showed us. And so maybe connectivity isn't what we want to call it. That's going to be up to us in term, as determined by our discussion. But that was an example of, I think, what we would be looking for. So do I have a volunteer to start out?
And just so you know, they can't be wrong answers,
No.
and there's not wrong categories. So I feel like we have 6 buckets to drop a deposit in, and we're trying to figure out where it gets deposited. So
Right.
don't feel that there's anything wrong, or
Or, if someone wants to start out with an overview, of their perspective, that would be fine.
Mike City, why don't you go first? I'll follow you.
I probably got too academic when I sent out my quick analysis, but after looking at all the data, and I'm fascinated by the fact that the passion at which people held various beliefs from one spectrum to the other on the same topic at opposite ends of the spectrum. And they really felt and believed that the solution was X, whatever X might be. But the part that I think that we're going to be grappling with, and what I came up with, is how do you compare? Well, there are techniques for doing comparisons between incomparable issues. And when I read through how we categorized everything, which was totally appropriate, otherwise it'd be a total minefield that no one would be able to understand. But when you looked at how people prioritize things, and I'll use the one example, well, it is connectivity, but it's bending it a bit. When you looked at connectivity, and I think that's the key element, calling it connectivity, the complaint really came through very strongly about parking. And there was a whole series of recommendations where people felt, well, if you're going to fix, you need to do this, this, and this, and solve the parking problem. But the parking problem manifested itself, as we're dealing with today, by a whole series of decisions that were made both by the city and by the county, by things they did and did not do, and decisions that were made within our own building code and our zoning that they did and did not do. And so you can't undo the past, you can only correct for the future. And then for only things that we can control specifically, but we can be aware and maybe affect those things outside of us. But the parking was very interesting, because what people were really trying to say was there was a problem with connectivity once they got here, however it was that they arrived, whatever means they took to get here. It was expensive to get here, it was time consuming to get here, and they perceived the solution as being parking, it was right up there as the number one issue. But connectivity is what they really were looking for. And people used various means of connections to get there. And there's various techniques in the transportation field that we use to come up with those pairs of where you started, where you wanted to be, how you got there, what your trip, et cetera. It's called the 4-step method. But so in doing that, I think the recommendations that showed up where people were saying, you should do this, were solely focused on that. As opposed to, there's an issue of when you do comparisons between things that don't seem to be comparable, say, okay, well, how is important parking versus keeping the quality of the beach that we have? And you'll say, hey, man, they don't compare to each other. No, you're forced to make a decision. You have a choice. Which one is more important to you ultimately? How would you rate on a scale of 1 to 5? Where would you go? Because the things that we're dealing with here, many of them are in complete conflict with each other. The connectivity issue, and I can't explain this unless I talk about the other things, people were very passionate from the standpoint of the environment and energy, extremely passionate. Unfortunately, all those things are totally antithetical for wanting them to fix the transportation problem in the context of what they wanted. So they're totally incompatible. So what do? Well, now you trade off those and say, okay, what's more important, the car or the beach? What's more important, the boardwalk or trees? And you'll say, well, I can't compare them. Yes, you can. What is more important to you individually, collectively? And then you start adding those up. So we've got the genesis of that. It's here. It needs to take a few more steps. I think that is what the workshops will be about, where we challenge people to do that, and us to do that, and let you get at what's consistent. Because the one thing, and this is, I must admit, it's my own personal approach to things. The issues we're dealing with are in a category of, you can tell I taught planning, called deep uncertainty. And deep uncertainty means you do not know what the future will hold explicitly. You may think you know generally. And so the decisions you make today, you would rather be generally right than absolutely wrong. And 5 years from now say, God almighty, what did we do? Why didn't we do? Well, we have the opportunity to do that. But in order to do that, the problem you have is right now, and we're all dealing with it, is, as we could tell from I think we knew this going in, but it just demonstrated it in the data. There are different opinions, and not everyone agrees on what the solution should be. We can't even get agreement between the experts within the city, within the county, within the state, of what's the right data that should be used, and why is one data more important than another data. So you get into this situation, well then, what are we supposed to do? And when you get into situations like that with deep uncertainty, you try to make decisions that are consistent from the standpoint of not being able to know the future, so that you are more generally right than absolutely wrong. And in the purely academic world, the statement is said that you try to make a decision that's in a non-dominated space that's Pareto-optimal. You go, Jesus, you said that to somebody in the public, they say, what are you talking about? What it really says is, it gets back to being, you'd rather be generally right than absolutely wrong. And a rising tide floats all boats. So if we make decisions and do it properly, whether it's zoning, transportation, or any of the issues in here, no one should be put at a disadvantage. They may not be as advantaged as some others, but no one will go down. And it's not easy to do, but it's definitely doable. And we can do it here. So I know I got a little off the track, but it really, from the standpoint of connectivity, where Debbie is leading us, is how do you trade off these other issues with connectivity? It's going to be an interesting challenge, and I think we're going to make some good decisions as we plow through this. One thing I would say, which as I was going through all this, and I think it's the commissioners and the mayor already getting into position to attack this, is when you look at the structure of a CDP and you look at what the state says our CDP is supposed to be, and the basis upon which the CDP is created and the documents that it uses, two things stand out, and one is in the areas of land use and zoning and your building code. We've got some real problems with our building code, as we've seen issues that have come before us, that have come before the commissioners, and variances, and it's in deep trouble. And I think, and this is a personal opinion, my assessment is that many of the issues we're dealing with today are because the building code has been allowed to basically age out and has not been able to respond to the decisions that are occurring, both technologically, physically, and phenomena that's changing within the public. And it's in desperate need of updating in an integrated way. And I think it's almost a chicken or egg here. I think we can have a big impact on the next building code that we select, even though there's standards that, national standards that we can easily follow. There are some very specific things that are very necessary for Rehoboth Beach if we're going to try to accomplish what's talked about in the comprehensive development plan. So I would say that's the play, that one playbook is so dominant in the CDP, and it's in such terrible shape right now. And I think time is of the essence on that, and probably, I don't know where it stands at the moment, but I think that probably needs to be accelerated at a rate even faster or commensurate with what the work we're doing on the CDP. Because without that being whole, we're sort of on thin ice here in many cases. Because it will have, when we finally get our CDP finished, it needs to be incorporated, as we learned in going to those courses, as a part of our code, not just as a neat document, but to be forcefully stated, it is part and parcel of our zoning code. With that, I'll shut up.
So just to recap on that, I've got from your input, parking, environmental, building code update, zoning code update. Kind of wraps it. There's a lot of umbrellas under there, but that was kind of the higher arcing. Okay, great.
I think, Mike, that was a very good overview of the key elements that I also believe came through from an analysis here. And I think probably other than traffic, I think frustration over the building code and it's the fact that it's so incomprehensible to most people, and the feeling that it's applied differently depending upon who you are. The fairness issue and equity in that regard, I think, was probably, from my standpoint, like the second most concerning matter to people in the survey.
Are you referring to the building code or the zoning code?
Well, both.
Or both?
Both.
Collectively?
Yeah,
all the
collectively,
building
yeah.
code.
Perry, you want me to go?
Sure. Steve?
Well, first, before I go, just as a follow-up to Mike, this morning I walked my dog within 2 blocks, and there were 6 giant houses under construction within the 2 blocks. I live on Stockley Street. And they all replaced more modest homes, which were perfectly fine. So I think that absolutely is a top priority, because what I'm seeing is just a lot of these giant homes being built. Some of them, I guess, are going to be little mini hotels, and I don't know, but they're really sort of out of control here.
So on that, so if I can interject on how it is, do you feel that Rehoboth should control the size, like the FAR, or as far as people's property rights? So you can have a large home if you want to, as long as you meet the regulations, but is it a FAR issue or
Well,
a
it's 2
rental
things.
issue?
It's lot coverage,
Yep.
and it's height, and it's the FAR.
And so they're legal right now because they're building.
Well, these are big homes, and some of them look to be, 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. Some of them are combinations of more than one lot. I'm not saying that they shouldn't build big, nice homes, but I'm just saying that if you want to save some of this more affordable stock that you have in the city, you have to make it a little bit more difficult.
Conflicts.
Right.
Yeah, that's, if I may, it's a very good point, because it manifests itself in transportation. In transportation, we use a definition called a single-family dwelling unit. DelDOT has a definition of that. The definition of the single-family dwelling unit is not what single-family dwelling units are in Rehoboth right now, and haven't been for several years. The DelDOT definition is, and Debbie, I'm going to forget right at the moment, I should have known this, but I think it's 3.5, in the transportation handbook, it's 3.5 bedrooms and 2 baths.
Yep.
And that's upon how they generate their trip generation. To your point, if we look at the homes that are being built in Rehoboth Beach, if you look at what the ones that have been coming through lately, they're 5-bedroom,
5 or 6.
7-bath,
Yeah.
6-bathroom, 9 baths. That's not a single-family dwelling unit. So when you intellectually try to look at what DelDOT does when they're doing traffic studies, our density per dwelling unit is 2 to 3 times trip generation what it is in the rest of the county. And that gets lost when people are looking at things. So again, it gets back to connectivity, gets back to what the building code is, the coverage, the size of parking, of what you can fit on your property. But then that conflicts if you built a home like that, and let's say you did, and you say terrific, and you're renting it, and 4 cars come in or 5 cars come in to stay at that dwelling unit, only 2 of them can fit on the lot, and the other 3 have to sit on the street. But if you allowed all of those cars to fit on that lot, now you're installing driveways, now you're doing away with green space, now you're doing away with, and you're generating runoff. This is all
those things.
interconnected at each stage. And right now, I don't want to go back to it again, that's an example where the building code is coming unglued, basically.
Well, to get back to the areas of concern, I had 6 areas of concern that I raised, which I'll list them for you, then I'll tell you a little bit about my thinking about them. The first one was land use. Second was parking. The third was infrastructure in general. The fourth was housing. And the fifth was parking. I'm sorry, the fifth was parks, arts, and other facilities in the city. And the sixth was professional services. For example, we don't have very many doctors in the city or other professionals. So under the land use, to me, the issue is really what is it here? What is its nature for Rehoboth, and where to include and apply it? Where do you put mixed-use housing? Where do you do things where you can sort of control the size of a home and its relationship to others, in the neighborhood? Under parking, the issue for me was, what is enough? Who's it to serve, as you said before? Where can it be provided and in what type of structure? For example, can it be provided in partnership with the county with a convenient and timely shuttle service from a site outside of the county, outside of the city in the county into the city? Infrastructure in general is, what are the infrastructure needs in the city? I read this morning in the Cape Gazette about some issues with our stormwater management and the mingling of sewage in with our stormwater. And, how does that need to be updated? What's adequate for now and what do we need in the terms of infrastructure in general, not just that, but bikeways and other things, thinking about 10 years from now. And obviously the number of people coming here in the summertime and in the key seasons, that's going to get bigger. And in the wintertime, I remember when we first started coming down here, the wintertime traffic was pretty low. Now the wintertime traffic is pretty much what it is in the summer, at least on the main highways. Another one was housing. What type of housing is needed in the city in order to maintain its small town and resort feel, but at the same time allow for and provide for workforce and middle income units for future growth to meet the city's needs of additional employees for commercial services. What I see is a large press for additional commercial type properties, whether they're hotels or other types of commercial services. The fifth one was parks and other arts and entertainment facilities. What are the additional parks and entertainment facilities and venues desired and needed? If so, where can they be provided and what resources are required to construct and maintain them? The sixth was professional services. For example, healthcare and all other types of professional licensed professionals. Do we need more of them to provide services to our residents? And what kinds and amounts of impact would their presence have on the city and its services? For example, we have more dentists, more doctors, more attorneys. Their clients and patrons are going to come into the city and they're going to impact our facilities. So those were my 6.
I think you guys are really giving some good comments here, because what I was hearing on a couple of things is Sussex County just completed a housing study for the county, so we can pull some data for that. The professional services, we can look at some licensing, because no offense, there's tons of lawyers in Rehoboth and realtors. But you're right, on the medical profession, we're having to get on the highway with all the traffic to do any kind of medical, dental. So I think we've got some data and some good topics to be able to support these and take them to the next level. Or educate. The infrastructure, there's facilities plans on every single infrastructure that's provided by the city. So what we can do is pull some data into that to educate and let people know they're looking at 5 to 10 years. They're looking at a stormwater structure system. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening that might not be privileged to the public as much or would pay attention to an engineering document that's about this thick. So that's really good because those topics help us get information to be able to relay back to you to help out with the process and educate. So that's perfect.
One of the things that really jumped out to me is the need for the city to partner with the county and the state and also the private sector to get facilities. We haven't talked much about it, but there's a public-private partnership trend in the country and in the world called P3 partnerships. And that's where the private sector comes in and provides not only the expertise, but the infrastructure resources. They build them, and they maintain them, and they share in some of the revenue from it. And the city of Rehoboth would probably be a pretty good candidate to attract some of these private sector partners because of the tremendous potential fee flows that can come from some of these facilities. For example, if we ever decide to build a parking structure in the city.
Absolutely. And they were looking at the P3 option, but Delaware is very familiar with the P3 option. And the governor is now, I don't know if you've read recently, where he's doing the N6, where you do land development and he wants the permits and everything done in the state in 6 months. So DELDOT have to revamp. He just released it last week. And I think the other concern that you have on Rehoboth too is the price of land in Rehoboth and how much you would have to buy to do a facility, to meet parking, to meet other needs. So you see some of these pieces that are coming up if you want to do a facility. For example, if you wanted to do another convention center or a private art facility, you're talking about taking a block or two of prime real estate. So in the land development side of Rehoboth, it's hard because you're developed. We don't have a lot of vacant land, so it's redevelopment versus open space development. So that trend kind of falls into what can you do with redevelopment of P3, and then what's profitable and what grant funding can be made, what public investment. So it's a little unique because you're built. Go ahead.
I keep hearing that we're built. We're only built if we don't want to increase zoning and height. Many cities rebuild themselves over and over. We have a 4-story height in the city. If we do zoning changes and we do allow for increased density and we do allow for more height, we're not built. We can rebuild or redevelop. It all depends on what we want.
Other comments?
I was going to comment on something different that you had already kind of gone down the path on. I think one of the things that I hear you talk about the county and the state and partnering with them. I think one of the other things we have to look at is how we're impacted by them. I think one of the things that was very clear and came through on all 3 surveys for me was there is a lot of growth that's obviously being pushed by the state and the county, that we are being impacted as a small little town here. And when you hear stories about, the traffic and the parking and all of the comments that are made, a lot of that honestly is because of what's going on around us. And I think that's one of the other things that we have to think about as a little 1 mile, square town is, so how do we react to and how do we start to kind of care for, right, what's going on around us? Because I don't see it really stopping. I mean, last Sunday I went out Route 16 to go to a little craft fair, and I was amazed at how many communities are going up with 2-lane country roads as the infrastructure. I just don't see any building stopping in sight. And it's been going on now for at least 10 years. So I think that's one of the other things that we have to kind of think about is we may not be able to, necessarily impact traffic as much or parking as much. Those cars are here, and people that are living outside of Rehoboth don't have the ability to walk to Rehoboth. They have to get in a car or some form of transportation to come here. So I think that's just a given that we're going to have to think about. So how do we care for that in this study?
You triggered a very good comment. The governor's report just came out, and they had statistics about how Sussex County and all the different levels has the most recorded numbers for growth not in a level 1 or 2. So Sussex County, unlike Kent and Newcastle, is known to do sprawl. And they actually put it in their plus comments with their comp plan. The state came in and said, you know, we don't have the infrastructure in place for transportation. So you bring up a really good point, because the priority level 1 for state strategies, it's where the state has basically came in and said, this is where we want higher density, we want the population to go. So level 1 is pretty intense. It's not just the city limits of Rehoboth, it's actually what brought all the development on 1. So you look at the jungle gyms from all the way there and how it's kind of even grown more on the highway, and you talk about the transportation or what's happened west, you're exactly right. So I think addressing some of those statistics in what's happening in the county, in the comprehensive plan, and the ramifications it could have on the municipality. You want the tourism, you want the growth, but there's pains with that too. So there's some great backup data I think we can pull out to be able to help in the workshops on that too. You're exactly right. So transportation, mass transportation, train has been looked at coming down here before.
Just on that, what Rachel was saying, we've become the downtown for the county. That's why, I mean, I think the last time we were here, I mentioned about the fact that on a weekday in the middle of the winter, there's really very few people here in the city, but if you come into town, all the parking spaces are taken because people come in for their dinner, and, you know, this is the downtown. So unless we take some steps to do something about these impacts, because the growth in the county is going to continue. So I think Sussex County is the largest county in the state, isn't it?
Yep.
And there's an awful lot of undeveloped land. So, you know,
And
one
it's
of
less expensive, a lot less expensive, right? So to your point on, you know, folks that want to live in this area may not be able to afford Rehoboth. There are definitely options, right? If you want, you know, townhouses, single-family houses.
But they want to go to the beach, and they want to come in for
Right.
dinner, and they want to, you know, they want to go to Funland, and they want to do all those other things,
Right.
which, you know, we are the downtown for the county.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, go ahead, it's fine.
So Steve's comment is the one that I was just about to make, that through all 3 surveys, I thought it was very, very clear that people who live outside of Rehoboth Beach consider downtown Rehoboth Beach, our city, to be the downtown for the whole place. So that's great. That's something we've done right. And I've also, through the survey results, we're a very walkable city. It can always be better, but people really like walking here. So in terms of what is in the city that we really need to address here, what problem do we own and we want a solution for? Above all other issues, I think it's parking, because that is where all the complaints are, and they are about parking in the city. So I took a little bit of a different approach, and I was trying to look through the comments and figure out who is complaining about parking and what is their complaint. And I'm evolving towards this model that we're in the entertainment business for 3 or 4 months a year. And our demand for vehicles and parking is highest on 12 weekends. It's just like the Wednesday before Thanksgiving at the airport. I think what we're not doing good is planning for peak demand. And I think, like, I don't have any complaints about parking because I have a house in the city, so I drive into the city and I park my car either in front of my house or in the driveway. People who arrive by Uber or bus don't have any complaints because they want to get to the city's walkable, they arrive, they depart, they're happy, they get their ride and they leave again. I think visitors are happy until they get here, and I think they want us to direct them to parking much more specifically, like valet service, directional signs, flaggers, cones. I think if we can, if people can arrive to where they want to be, and we can either move their vehicle or be very specific about moving their vehicle, I think we can take complaints about parking from 95. I would hope we could cut it at least in half or more. But I think it's only at peak times when we have to do this. I think we should start thinking about what it means to have solutions that help people during those times. Even if it's parking their cars slightly out of the city and driving them into the city and dropping them off. I don't know what it is, but I think the other comments that were throughout the surveys is that parking, there should be acres and acres of parking. Well, that speaks to Mike's issues. You know, where are the environmental factors? You know, where's the housing? Where's all the other things we want? But they also said over and over again, it should be cheap and free. So we're not going to be able to satisfy that demand.
Right.
But we could make it quick and orderly and maybe reasonably priced, so it would be a trade-off. You know, we sell people a permit now, but we say, there you go, you're on your own. You know, maybe we need to do it a little bit differently.
I think you brought up a good point. We serve some other coastal towns as Max does, and some of the things I think you look at is your entire city is to the east of the highway. You go further down south and they are segregated. They're literally, half of their town is divided by the highway. So the transportation is, you're walking across a major or roadway network. So you're divided here. You come in, you park, and you're done. Where other places you may have to park out further and come in. So I think that's one of the things. And the other thing is, we talk about downtown Rehoboth, but serving other communities, every coastal community is hitting more peak season longer, off-season. Bethany, South Bethany, Fenwick. People are coming down. They're just gravitating. It's not necessarily a retirement thing, but it's people like that time of year, and more people are liking that time of year. So that, we don't know if it's going to continue to go up with the trends and the ages and the incomes, or if it's going to go down. But I think the peak service demand is stretching. So to identify how you do all of your services at peak demand is a really good comment. But connectivity is correct. You park one time and you have it all.
Yeah, I drive, park, and never use my car again until I leave. I think that's what visitors want to do, too. I don't think they want to look for parking.
I thought what was interesting in looking at the different groups, the business survey, the visitor survey, and the community survey, how different they were and how different their goals were. That if you look at them, but they did have some overlap and they had the same issues, which is parking, but they have them for different reasons. Right. The business survey, they, and rightfully so, want to have parking spaces in front of their businesses at all times so that it's easy for their customers to get to their business, and that's what I would want as a business owner as well. They want parking for their employees so they can park close by. They have an issue with what they call day trippers, who are people that come into town with a cooler. They already have their lunch and their drinks, and they go to the beach, and they stay all day, and they park all day, and then they leave town, and they don't patronize any of the local businesses or restaurants and stores. And their thought is, well, they're just taking parking spaces that could otherwise be customers. And the community survey, they have an issue with parking as well because they want to be able to just run to a shop and pick something up and have parking available. The visitors have a parking issue for obvious reasons. They also want to be able to jump into town and park as close as they can to the stores and such. And the businesses want growth. They want more customers. The community survey says that 78% of the people want no more growth in Rehoboth. So there's a lot of conflicting desires amongst the different groups. The community survey, they want higher end businesses, higher end. That's not necessarily what the visitor survey says. And so there's different, and as Rick said early on, there's social issues that are working that nobody has any control over, what the demographics of visitors to town are. And so I just found it interesting how there's a lot of conflict between the groups and what they want and how they think it can be solved. And so from a planning perspective, it's going to be a real juggling act to figure out.
I think it's going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, a big challenge to figure out how to, like you talked about, a parking garage. I don't know, is it worth building a parking garage for 12 weekends a year? I don't know, and some would say they wouldn't want a parking garage because it's just going to increase traffic coming into town, that there's going to be more parking, but more bottleneck because there is more parking. And the day trip, some say they want beach fees so that and you know, the community survey, they have a concern with the day trippers because they feel like they're using services and not paying any, and, you know, that the property owners are paying taxes to maintain all the services, and the day trippers are using the restrooms, the beaches, the trash facilities, and not contributing. So there's all kinds of conflicting wants and desires and goals that.
I think you brought, once again, everybody's bringing up really good points. The other thing I think to remember too is this document doesn't solve all. So it's interesting we talk about parking because we really will not find in the comp plan the answer. And this is something, Mike, with planning, it's really interesting to see. Our job is to bring it up, divulge, come up with some options, but there could be an entire parking feasibility study. And the reason I know this is because we completed it in City of Newcastle. So City of Newcastle came in and said, we have a parking problem. Well, the problem was people didn't want to walk 2 blocks. Because we actually did a map and wayfinding that 2 blocks away, we had over 90 spaces. So how are we teaching people to get there? And they're one-way streets, people are getting confused. So one of the, we find out that parking's a problem. What part of parking? Is it rentals? Is it not rentals? Is it, we've heard everything. What, is it traffic? Is it day trippers? Is it not day trippers? Are day trippers packing bologna sandwiches like we all used to because they can't afford the meals that are, the commodity of the meals that are coming here? Who knows? But I think one of the things that's important for us is that is not on our back for our big weight. It's to identify and get a path forward, because I do think you're gonna need additional studies, additional information, additional problem solving that would be what I call a one-off planning study, a one-off engineering study. So it's hard to, we don't have to solve those problems. The real challenge here is what are the goals, what are the priorities, and what's your path forward? Is that probably a good summary on what we do in a comp plan?
I think so. The key is, you know, it's what do you want to be when you grow up? Generally speaking, but it's so easy to get trapped, and I'll just use this as an example without bias to anybody, but a couple of years ago, the business community was complaining. They wanted more turnover in the parking. And so the recommendation was, although the rates went up and those day trippers did in fact contribute $1 million to us this past year, in addition to what they normally pay, but they wanted to decrease the amount of time that a car could stay parked. So they wanted 3 hours, and that was implemented. Now, the business community came back and said, that's the worst decision you possibly could have made, because now people, they're coming in, and now they got to go, they're at my restaurant, but now they got to run back out, and they got to move the car. We don't want to do that. It's a bad idea. Well, it was a good idea in year 1, then it was a bad idea in year 2, and then now they're now looking at some other possibilities. And I had made some recommendations at the one meeting I was at as a public participant, because I think that's the thing I would hate to see happen in the CDP, that we get so focused on a singularity of solution rather than looking at the generality of what we're trying to achieve and making the very tough decisions, because as everyone has just said, there's a conflict between what you would like to see explicitly and what you would like to see generally speaking to keep the vitality and the nature of Rehoboth Beach. And I think the point that was several people made, and Rachel brought it up, is the fact that the parking, Jeff, and you said all these cars come in, and that problem, we can't solve, quote, that problem. I mean, DelDOT can't solve it, we can't solve it, the county can't solve it. But collectively, perhaps, we could come up with a solution, whether it's public-private partnership or public as well, that the county is more involved outside the confines of this, because we as an entity contribute a massive amount of money to the state of Delaware through individual incomes, taxes, fees, you name it. If you add all that up, the economic impact is, it's not a free lunch on their end, and they need to perhaps participate more to help us be successful and help them be successful. Right now, they're getting a free ride. And although DelDOT put in the other transfer station, and there were some problems initially during the October Festival and some complaints, but there can be other options and other approaches to make use of available land so people get closer to Rehoboth, and the services are such that they have some security, that they know they'll get here in time, they'll get back in time, and then they'll start to use it. I haven't driven to New York City since 1975. I never drive to New York City and the reason was, I use all the various modes of transportation because to go in New York in 75, it was terrible. Now it's absurd. We have the same phenomena here. We were a small town that just happened to be next to the ocean for many years. It's not the same now. I moved here in 1977. I'd like it to still be like it was then. Well, forget it. That course is left. But I wouldn't want to see us lose what is Rehoboth Beach, sort of the core value of Rehoboth Beach that draws people in that they want to be here, regardless of their age. As evidence of the fact, when you look at the distribution, yes, economically, we're a very high-end community. And when you look at the distribution, I was actually kind of stunned that the distribution of incomes for those that were visitors were coming in was as high as it was. And this is only based on gut feel because I see the people walking by my house in the summer, is I think that it may have been disproportionately representing people that were higher incomes who took the time to fill out the survey. And I think an awful lot of the mid to lower income were missed because the mix of folks that I see that are traversing to the beach doesn't seem to reflect that. So I would say our data may be a little biased in some way, strictly on the visitor survey. But the rest of it was, all that I could see statistically was particularly with residents and the business was very, very
Do you feel
good.
there's a divide in preservation? I mean, the preservation of the old cottages versus the new buildings? Because sometimes, you just ask people when you talk to them, some people want to preserve the cottages and not go big. Some people are saying, these are nice-looking homes. They are aesthetically pleasing. They have front porches. They're going back to the planting trees. Do you feel that the city has that divide of feelings, or do you feel it's teetering one way or another? Because when we get to your character section, we took 3 of our EITs and our planners, and I had them walk all around the city, and I said, what community character do you have? And there wasn't the same answer. Everybody hit some different things. So community character is one thing that we want to kind of get into talking, but do you feel that as a community as a whole, the people you talk to living here, that there's a mix on preservation and new, or there's been a tilt on new versus holding stock on the preservation of the older uses, older stock homes?
I think there's definitely a division. And what I took from reading the answers of the survey was the general feeling that I think a lot of people just have generalized issues. For example, like parking. Parking, mind you, is an issue. But as you said, and one of the questions I read, this person said, 2 blocks away, you can find a parking space. And you're talking about a walkable city. And I live in the city, and my street is, only time it's ever full will be Memorial Day, 4th of July, but other than that, it's always open for walking.
We will put a sign right on your street now.
Park there. No, but it's true, but not only my street,
Rachel's street too.
but
No,
all,
it's not. Went over.
but all the streets south, south of the city were that way. This idea, and you touched on it with these mega, houses, mini hotels and what have you. Well, first of all, I think that 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, you can't build that in the city anymore. I think the maximum is like 4,200 square feet, but then you have to have like 100 by 100 lot. And we just went through our own building process, and the house we tore down, some people might say it was a wonderful cottage built in the 1920s, but we had it torn down. Hazmat had to come in because it had mold and it had lead in it. So that's certainly not a house that I want to live in or anyone else wants to live in, but you drive by and say, oh, what a cute little cottage. So we built a house and we put 6 bedrooms in, and because we have a large family and they all live in the DC area. So for all the holidays, all the bedrooms are occupied. The other thing I found interesting too is that the only 25% of those who own homes here actually rent them out. So we have a lot of issues that deal with rental that not only affect the people who do rent, but also the homeowners who are trying to enjoy their property rights. And so I think we need to do a better job of educating the public in terms of, the other thing that bothered me too was people say, well, if you know someone in government or you're rich, you can get anything you want. You can get a waiver, you can get, and I didn't get any waivers when I built my house.
Did you try that?
Oh, I did. I did.
You just got appointed.
It didn't work.
Just some observations listening to everyone speak. As Lee said, there's all these conflicts, and you really can't address them adequately because they're going to continue to exist. But what we can do, we can identify the forces. In other words, the trends and the forces. I mean, this is a 10-year plan. So we know what forces and trends are happening. We know that the numbers of people coming are increasing. We know that the traffic, for whatever reason, is increasing. We know that the desire for more commercial development is increasing. We know that the desire for more facilities, such as clear space, they want a new theater. We can identify those forces, and in the comprehensive development plan, we can set forth some alternatives for the commissioners and the other departments in the city to implement. That includes the zoning and all the rest of it, so that we can sort of find our way so that we can maintain Rehoboth as Rehoboth and still be Rehoboth 10 years from now. So, we can identify these forces.
I would also just suggest that you identify the strengths. So going through all 3 surveys, I was looking for, from the work that I do and my background is really around the whole customer experience, right? So I was looking for themes as it relates to the visitor experience, the resident experience, the business person's experience. What are they looking for? And what does Rehoboth have today that's drawing people? And what do we want to keep Rehoboth to be in 10 years, right? To still bring people here. And I mean, there were definitely some very kind of common themes that we saw. And they're in my mind, they're all pretty practical. One is the beach and the boardwalk. Make sure it's clean. Make sure the boardwalk is safe. Make sure it's clean. Make sure that we have storefronts filled and that they are inviting, for people to come into. I mean, there are definitely very specific comments that we saw across these surveys, and a lot of different comments, I'm sure, across different socioeconomic, type profiles. But in my mind, there were absolutely some things here that we need to put forth as some plans in this document to ensure that we maintain the tourism that Rehoboth is really all about, but the charm that the town has and the reason why people want to, deal with parking and traffic to come to this town. So there are definitely some opportunities here that are our strengths that I think we absolutely need to make sure that we're planning for.
Yeah, and Rachel, the one of the strengths I put down, one of the things that I thought was very notable is the city's recreational facilities. I'm counting the beach and the boardwalk, of course, as the main ones, but people noted those as positives. The bandstand,
Yes.
the
Events and
events like
festivals, yeah.
Polar Bear Plunge.
Right.
So
And
the
concerts on the weekends. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like iconic.
Right. But they also made a lot of good comments that were facilities that are missing, which are actually here, but they don't know they're here, like pickleball. We have pickleball. I understand we have pickleball on the tennis court, or one of the tennis courts.
Well,
why
there were comments about that with great big and capital letters.
Yeah.
Please,
Yes.
we need pickleball.
And we have it.
Biggest trend
Right.
is, yep.
I thought it was, pretty amazing. But even, you can take this concept that Rachel's promoting, the experience. I think you can take that in a lot of different ways and think about things we might do. For instance, I did see a lot of comments about handicapped accessibility, and I think we've done a lot here. But we may not have some of the right kind of spaces in the right places. People mentioned over and over again that wheelchair accessible vehicles, they had trouble finding a place to use them. But yet when I walk around, I do see the places
Yes.
here.
I think we've done a good job.
But I maybe that's a communication job that the city needs to take
I
on.
don't think they're adequately identified,
Yeah.
and so people don't know where they are.
Right.
And I in that regard, on the ADA issues, I wonder how many of the comments that were simply, directed at, ADA might have been driven by the fact that we have a lot of old buildings that are not ADA compliant. They're not required to be.
Don't have to
And
be, that's
so,
right.
you know, I mean, that's something, I mean, that we have stores on Rehoboth Avenue that are not accessible to the handicapped. You know, but they're old buildings and they're, you know, they have no ADA requirements.
Your bathrooms, half of the bathrooms won't meet. So if they go to change something, it opens up Pandora's box. And we just found this out in our office because we have a 7x7 bathroom, 2 of them. Thought it was handicapped. It was in 2010 compliant, but now because of the functionality of the handicap motorized vehicles, et cetera, your turn radius
space.
is a lot different now. Your door widths, the way they have to come in or swing out. So if you're talking about having a building that is non-conforming with the code, when they come and they want to invest their money in it, it opens up a lot of stuff, electrical, plumbing, and eventually that will happen with new owners or investment. But it is a loss of space immensely about what you have to do to bring it up to code as well. Aisle widths are now 4 feet. There's no 4 feet in any t-shirt shop that I've ever seen because you touch everything when you walk through it. So those are things to think about, and that's building code related, and that's fire marshal related, and that's ADA, which is federal. So you're right, older structures will make it less accessible.
That's another reason why you need to redo the building code and have it done professionally, because as people begin to renovate their houses, make changes, or businesses, they're going to come across those issues. And then they don't do it because they can't get a permit from the city. And I think the other thing, too, is that it was uniform that most people want to keep the Rehoboth charm that we have here, and they don't want to see it go away. And I keep on getting back to the fact we're just 1 square mile, so we can't provide all the services. We, you know, the medical services, the healthcare services. I mean, they are available, and it's within the easy drive.
Right.
So,
Workforce housing, right, same.
yes, and I think we need to, look, say, here's our square mile, here's what we can do, here's what we can provide. Let's find a way to solve the parking issues, whether it be a parking garage. People talked about making the Ocean Block Rehoboth Avenue pedestrian friendly. If you take this parking space away, maybe do build a garage. There's a lot of opposition to building a garage too. But I think those are things we need to look at. I mean, the idea of having an area to walk around and be at the beach would be fun, be exciting. But we have to always keep in mind that this is 1 square mile, and we have to identify the issues and then find solutions to them.
It's the same theory when you hear comments like, make Baltimore Wilmington Avenue one way, the second block one way. So when you look at that and you're saying, how would it impact? It's a great idea. It's going to be walkable. It'll be courtyard. You can have events, kind of like Salisbury has downtown, that they're actually pulling out now and making a street. So you look at that and you're like, how are the local businesses going to get deliveries? They don't have back alleys. How are people we're going to take away probably 35 parking spaces. The right-of-way won't even allow us to do it. So those are the things that you look and see, how would that affect businesses? How would it affect parking? But there's also studies, engineering, that be able to help say why you should go in that direction or not. So you're absolutely right on everybody. I feel like everybody has this one direct path of this is how you solve all.
There's no.
Not the planning commission, but I feel like it's literally like parking garage is going to make Rehoboth great. Everybody's going to be able to park all the time until it's full. But if we can get people out on the highway, vacant spaces, use some maybe like malls that aren't doing as good, economically as possible. I think the partnership thing, with the state and out would help. But you're right, 1 square mile, you can only put so many potatoes.
And again,
in
we're only talking about 12 weeks maximum, and I don't even think it's that long personally. I mean, the season really doesn't start until the end of June and ends in the middle of August with kids going back to school.
Well, do you remember in off-season where you had maybe 1 restaurant that was open, 2 restaurants that were open? Now you have some options Thursday through Sunday. Yep.
Once we kind of focus on the things that, as Rachel said before, that we probably should and can address, like the beach, you have to bear in mind that will affect the size of the employee base for the city. In other words, if we try to increase certain facilities or try to maintain certain things and we increase those, you will need more people to do those things and who are able. I mean, for example, I think there's just 1 person now who can repair the planks on the boardwalk, and that person is getting close to retirement. So, and anything that we do decide is a priority and that we do think that the comprehensive plan can address because it's vital to the city and its character, you have to look at the impacts of those things and, what resources and manpower and so on it will take to do those things. So,
Yeah, I think that the conundrum really is, there are differing views as to what people believe the city should be, and that's going to be a tough issue for us to solve for. And in that regard, I just want to say that Joyce, although she's not here, she did send me, her analysis, and I want to thank her for doing that. But overriding all of the topics that she identified was her concern that until we know what kind of community we want to be, it's virtually impossible to solve for these issues. And so I don't know what that community
Who determines
is.
that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, that's one of those things that is, some of it is social issues that I addressed at the outset. Other things are, traffic is an issue, we admit that, but unless we're going to put a gate up at Silver Lake and a gate at the canal and only hand out a certain number of passes.
They did that in Jersey.
Well, but is that what we really want? Is that what we, I didn't hear anybody suggest that. I heard people suggesting that we had to find more ways to get into the city. Well, I don't know where we could possibly put another road to get into the city. They didn't make any specific suggestions. I suppose we could ask for train service or something, but as it is now, we've got Route 1 and 1A, and, that's pretty much it, in coming in from two different sides of the city.
To Rick's point, there was a town in New Jersey, I don't think it's still there now. I think the gates are still there.
That might prove that we don't want to do what they did.
Yeah, Cedar Grove, New Jersey, the mayor took the initiative that when the city became so loaded on 4th of July weekend, he had the cones put up and the police put out and would not allow anyone else into the city. And he saw it as a matter of public safety. And on certain weekends, we have a severe public safety problem. God forbid if something were to happen, we're in deep trouble for those couple weekends. But the point being, there are ways to let the parking issue again, to let people know that things are full up and seek other means. And there are other means, not as good as what they should be, but maybe that's one of the things that we do. And I would say the point is who determines the CDP? The commissioners ultimately, and the mayor, make the decision on whether the CDP is worthwhile and they want to pursue it the way it is, or they come back to us and say, we think this is great, except this, and this we don't particularly agree with. So they ultimately can modify it because they are elected. We're appointed by them, and our obligation is to give them a CDP, and hopefully, and it may come down to that because all of us have different views, but the facts don't cease to exist just because they're ignored, so to speak. So our obligation is to try to make the best decision we can from the facts that we have in front of us to make a recommendation. And the recommendation isn't explicit. In some cases it is, but in the majority of it is generalities so that we don't get in and say, okay, we think you should build a parking garage that's 300 and it should be located here. That's not what we say.
give them alternatives is what we do.
We talk about there are alternatives to approach parking, and some of them don't involve parking. Gets back to my whole theme was connectivity, and I'll just make this as a point to sort of indicate how people jump very quickly on whatever the issue happens to be. The parking garage is a very good one. There's the potential for public-private partnership, and everybody says, "Wow, it could generate 300 spaces." Well, actually, it's 200 because there already is 100 some there. And then you look at 200, and then you say, "Well, wait a minute. What will 200 spaces do to the loading that we see based on the density coming into the city?" Virtually nil. So the question is, what is the density of spaces? What is happening with the number of vehicles that enter the city? And you see that there's this gigantic disproportionality. So that if you added 200, maybe if you added 1,000, it might have an impact. But then it goes to the direction of Jeff's perspective, and all of it says, wait a minute, that's insane. Because then you destroy everything that you wanted to keep in the first place. So it ends up being a very interesting analysis that is what the CDP is intended to do to try to maintain the character without getting into the explicitness of do A or B, but at least have the generalities in place.
I want to ask Debbie a question. Are there certain specific elements that the state requires us to have in the CDD?
Yeah, so we have, there's a checklist of what has to be there, but when it comes to specific policy and working for so many towns, I have had some towns that have come in and said, this is exactly what we want to see. The planning commission says, we want to see a parking garage. So that's part of your implementation. So every year you have to give a report to the state to say, what did you do on your implementation? Maybe what that recommendation usually comes into is, we would like to obtain and move forward with wayfinding signs, a parking analysis. So it gets it into maybe problem-solving exercise versus the end result
So
at that
I
time.
can see where we'll probably come up with alternatives, suggestions for the commissioners.
Right.
But the way I see these things, and I've been through this before, not here, but other places, we'll end up with a document. One of the things we need to decide is, do we want this document to touch on everything, or do we want it to be pretty sort of, these are the 5 or 6 things that we think are the priorities for the next, and here are your, alternatives within that. I'm hoping we'll do something like that, which is something that somebody can read and understand and not be all over. And then we'll probably have a number of work sessions or joint sessions with the commissioners as we present this document to them, and then they'll ask us questions, or they'll do like Mike said and tell us to go back. But if we can identify the specific things that must be included that the state wants, and if we can then identify what we think are the things that we can actually address, like the beach, for example, we're the only ones who can address the beach, the county can't, and then provide alternatives, we should be able to come up with a pretty workable, understandable document that the commissioners can then adopt, and they can decide what they want to implement, and what their priorities are. For example, if they want to change, they want to change our codes because our building code must be changed. They should then have the alternative to go out and hire professionals who can come in and help us do that. In other words, I think it should be a workable document that the city can use as a master guide for where they want to go.
That's exactly right, and it is mandated, and we do know what has to be put in there. So I think that's the tail end of this, that we're trying to get through this exercise, because right now it's great because I have like 15 topics. So I have 15 topics to kind of formulate into the platform exercise, which is great. Kind of back to the point, I love it when people say the building code really needs work. I've met with the building code, and we're actually proposing, which we have to put a proposal in for the zoning code rewrite. So the first thing you do as a consultant, and you're very familiar with this, is you come in and say, what's wrong with your code? You use it every day, what's wrong with it? Well, definitions, great. They're standard definitions. You get them from several different resources, they're standard definitions. Well, then it's really people's gray area. Well, give us a list of the areas where interpretations are kind of gray, let's tighten those up legally. And then it's, we just don't like some things. Well, I'm gonna look and try to figure out what you don't like and figure out how to prohibit it or figure out how to allow it. So we've met with the staff to say, these are housekeeping administrative issues that we have had issues with that we need to address to be able to do our job better, that have maybe some gray areas. We need interpretation, we need the lawyer to be involved a lot. So we scope it, the zoning code, to say, here's the list from the staff who use it every day. Here's a list from developers, stakeholders, investors, homeowners that they have the issues with. Here's the list of all the variances that have been going on because our code doesn't allow these things. So once we digest that, we start getting to the code rewrite. So I do know that the commissioners have the financial consideration of things. So they've got, probably, I don't know how many projects that they want in this year's budget. And they collect them from the operations, what we're gonna do, what we wanna do, how to help the staff, how to help get the priorities together, and then it gets budget driven. So each year, when we first scoped this, we said, it'd be great if the Planning Commission had the CDP, the annual report had this implementation list, and every year you go through and you do a recommendation on what you've been tasked with on a CDP. You would like to say, we'd like to move forward in this task. Does it meet the needs of your budget? Does it meet the needs of the commissioners? Because the commissioners usually do not get involved in this type of level. But you're also not aware of infrastructure improvements. You're not aware if the sewer's good, the water's good. You're hearing that from department heads, and you should. You don't want to be the experts in that. You just don't want to be the experts in infrastructure. It's somebody else's responsibility. but the comprehensive plan has to say, we can't accept any more growth because of our infrastructure needs. So if you can't provide sewer, water, electric, whatever services you provide, it'll be identified in the comprehensive plan. So the one point that I wanted to make is, I think, my personal opinion is Rehoboth is still taking shape. It's really still taking shape. We've seen it change. Who would have thought you've had some of the things you have, or who would have thought you would have had the different kind of services that you have here? Who would have thought that the Jazz Festival is actually everywhere now versus 6 restaurants? It kind of started that theme a little bit with places. So the Polar Bear Plunge, people come in here, different states, and everything's open up in February. So I think playing on the beach, playing on your events, playing on your services, you're still taking shape. I think it's going to be hard to come up with a vision that everybody agrees upon, maybe in Rehoboth, but I think what would come about is, how do we do peak services? How do we continue with the things that everybody likes? How do we take away some of the impediments of the things that people aren't liking? And how do we educate everybody on what we're doing? The vision is going to be difficult here, but I think your goals and objectives will be a little easier transition for everybody.
Debbie, are there any resources, are there planning associations, or, because Rehoboth can't be the only town that has these issues.
No, I can tell you.
And towns that have been dealing with them for
Oh,
years
absolutely.
and years and years.
Well,
I mean, you go up and down the
the,
East Coast, any beach town.
The Urban
needs-
Land Institute has, they have a program where their experts, a number of their experts will come in and sit down with the city and the planning commission and go through a series of charrettes and so on and make proposals to you. It's not inexpensive, but it's something, I'm a member of the Urban Land Institute, I'm on a national council.
Yeah.
And they're probably the premier professional services or think tank, in the country. And, the city could avail itself of that if we wanted to, or we could if we got permission from the commissioners and a budget for it. It could be very helpful. Also, probably we should meet with the various staffs that have raised these issues, such as the building inspector and the people that deal with the building.
Right, so that's what I was kind of talking about. That is operated through the city manager. So they go through their department managers. If the city manager is having issues, at any time they can change the building code without input from committees or boards. Because the city manager's job is to run the departments. The department's job is to take their issues up to the city manager. The city manager's job is to take it to the appropriate board, which is the Board of Commissioners. Then the Board of Commissioners and the city manager can make a recommendation to do environmental committee, planning commission, tree committee, boardwalk committee. So it'll be interesting, and you have so many committees, like we were kind of alluding to when we talked to Rick, you may have one representative from each committee versus going through 5 committees to get approval. So I think you'll see that the building code changes will probably be directed by the building code to the city with input from the attorney, the professionals, and the draft implications brought to multiple boards, I would assume. So that's kind of how they were kind of rolling it, so nobody gets caught in the dark or kind of left in the loop. But it's the difference between operational, inspirational, and land use. So it's the land use feature. And I can tell you, when you talk about other towns, like we use the resources IPA quite a bit, University of Delaware IPA. It's localized, it's got a lot of professors that are former government, they're state, Delaware. I mean, Delaware has some great resources in government that are willing to come out. They are local experts. They have been honing in on Delaware numbers, Delaware trends.
The IPA is what's that stand for?
The Institute of Public Administration through University of Delaware. And there's really, really good professors that came from the backgrounds, and it's localized, it's a little bit more. But when you were talking about other towns, I have towns that can't get people in them at all. They do not have a draw, they don't have a trend, they don't have a beach, they don't have a river walk. Their businesses are coming out, they have empty storefronts. You probably drive through them from DC or Baltimore coming over here. So you're in a position where you have it and they want to be here, and these other communities and municipalities are like, what do we have as a draw? So I've worked on several municipalities that are like, what do we have as a draw? And they're trying to figure out what they are. They're trying to figure out, can we get one business in here that's not a Dollar General? Literally, they're happy when you get a Royal Farms or Wawa on the corner is a big, huge commercial component. So you've got it. Like you
I
said.
agree with you, and I have to say, as I read of course, the visitor survey was, 197 pages?
Yeah.
But I have to say, I was actually getting a little bit concerned when you think about that visitor experience, because we could be there 10 years from now if we don't put some plans in place to preserve the charm, the safety, the family-friendly, the Rehoboth as we all know it. And I think we have to be really careful there. I really do. I mean, there were situations that everyone saw in the comments that happened this year. I mean, we're a few blocks away from it. Probably all of us, don't really spend as much time on the boardwalk as our visitors do. But I was very concerned to hear about some of the antics that were going on, that we didn't really have, police at the ready or people controlling the problem. And, businesses are concerned, people are concerned, and, some people said, I'm not coming back. Yes, traffic and parking were some of those comments, but what was happening on the beach and boardwalk, trash, people with language and fighting, I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah,
We shouldn't tolerate any of that.
No, we shouldn't, and I agree with you, Rachel. I was also shocked. I mean, I've learned a lot of things that were going on in our community that I didn't know were going on.
Yes.
And, it triggered for me, the need for us to talk with Chief Banks. Now, some of that I see as city operational issues.
I understand.
Like the
Right.
issues of people loitering at the end of Wilmington on the boardwalk and the litter problems there and people vomiting in the streets and things, that's something, I mean, it's here, and I hope, the city, not just the planning commission, but, the management of the city is taking note of those
Right.
things.
Exactly.
Because, that affects, I mean, we can do all the planning we want, but if those things are not in place, it doesn't matter. Because you're right, we'll start to lose, the visitors that we do want here, and frankly, that we do need here.
That's right.
And so, those are important.
Our investment and our reason for living here too, right?
Exactly,
So
yeah.
I think we really do have to take note to some of
Well,
those comments.
That comes back to what we were talking about before, at least I was, in terms of the resources necessary to address these issues. And that's not just money. That's trained people who know how to deal with crowd control. And then, as was said before, it isn't all year. It's the months, it's the tourist months. But I mean, I do see more people coming in the off-season, maybe not for weeks, but for weekends and so on, and renting. And then the point was made before about why do we need a parking garage? I don't know if we do, because, right now, you can walk in the street lots of times at night and there'll be no cars at all. So.
I know we're talking about the parking garage. I have to ask this question. We have a beautiful school that was just built. There is a lot of land there, and in the summer months, school is not in session. So has anybody thought about using a schoolyard and a parking
Yeah,
lot?
it's
Let's provide a
been-
trolley service.
Yeah, it's been considered, and it's come up in the parking garage task force meetings. But there are people who argue, again, that no one wants to be that far away from the beach and boardwalk. When they come here, they want to be able to park in the first or second block or Rehoboth Avenue or Wilmington or Baltimore. And that no one's, there's even, some thought that, even if a parking garage, that got us 200 more spaces, went up next to City Hall here, that people would say, oh, that's too far to walk. I mean, quite frankly, I think people are just getting lazy. I mean,
Supposed to be healthy communities.
And
Well, they have-
maybe one of the things the city needs to do is promote, healthy living. Walking's good for you. But
Part
a
of
lot
that
of
may-
people just, and consideration's been given, to trying to encourage people to park, out on the highway at places, and be bussed in. But people, what we're hearing is, well, people aren't going to want to unload their cars with their coolers, with their bologna sandwiches and their, salads and, sodas and all that stuff from their cars into a bus, out of the bus onto the beach. And so, it's a really, really difficult issue to address. And a lot of it has to do with just, people's views as to, what's convenient for them.
Right.
And one thing I will disagree with Jeff on, when he made the comment, that when people, get here, they're happy, and so we can't make them unhappy with the parking. I don't think anybody's happy when they get here after they've spent an hour and a half trying to get down Route 1 between 5 Points and 1A.
We're real happy.
And so, I agree with you what we need to do, however. I mean, your solution was okay, but it's addressing a different problem. It's trying to make them happy when they get here.
And your code does allow for joint parking. So there's joint parkings that happen. Back in the day, a church used to have a lot of parking. And then the downtown had the business, and they had MOUs and agreements. What's changed in this world is liability, maintenance, the costs. So both parties have to agree upon if something was to happen on that property, who's going to maintain it, so it's just gotten to where it's got to be such a legal document, everybody's so protected, and then what are the fees? So there are mechanisms to do that if both parties agree.
So I shouldn't bring this up because I realize this is a public forum, but I have 5 kids and we live on Rodney Street. And for probably 8 years, my kids, in their entrepreneurial spirit on July 4th, would sell parking spots to people to come into town. They would go up and down the streets and they would talk to the neighbors and they would get so many slots in their driveways. And then they would have signs out on Bayard as they came across the bridge and they would sell those spots. One year they made over $800 with spots that they could sell. All that to say is I think if we gave people options, and pay for it or not, we could figure that out. But I just think that there are ways in which you can make people happy, when they get
Well,
here.
I think, what you mentioned earlier, Rachel, about the thousands of homes that are being built outside of town. I mean, if I lived in Lewis, what better thing to do on a nice summer night than come into Rehoboth?
You have a great biking trail, but I don't want to drink and bike.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Just
some
doesn't
people
work.
do. July 4th, I know a lot of people that'll bike down.
I mean,
for
you have all
fireworks.
these new, all this stuff that's out of the control of the city, and these people, I mean, of course they're going to come into town.
Sure,
I
and
mean,
you could see it in the comments.
Yeah.
Coming from Lewis, coming from,
Well, when you saw the visitor comment, it said that 65% of the visitors that came in town didn't stay in the city limits.
That's right.
Right.
Well, and look how close they are to you. We're not, look at the visitors, the range of how close they are to you.
Yeah.
So really, you're just an extended region. It's not like we're taking people upstate as much, or even to Kent County or Newcastle. It's just close to regional.
They think of this as their town. And I think that's something we, as a planning commission, need to coalesce around and do what it takes to bring them here.
We're going to have to face in this plan the hard necessities. In other words, there are several different things. We're talking about parking, but there's some other hard necessities besides parking. But just stick with that for a minute. We're going to have to face the hard necessities at certain times of the year. The city can only accommodate a certain number of cars, and beyond that it can't. And we need to find or make suggestions in this plan of alternatives that the commissioners could look to, either within the city or working with the county, of alternatives where after the busiest times of the year, you can't bring any more cars into the city at a certain point. You have to go to an alternative location, and you have to have a shuttle system that brings you in. That's a hard decision, but at some point, I mean, we're already near there. Where are we going to be 10 years from now? But then the other thing that we haven't talked about is technology. That could change things dramatically. But in the plan, we are going to have to look at the hard necessities in each of these areas and at least give the commissioners alternatives that they can implement.
Right, so we're looking at generalized implementation items. You may have enough data to make some more firm decisions, but at this time, there's going to be a lot of one-offs where you can stay focused, like the parking garage was the parking garage study. It wasn't a parking study citywide. So maybe we say that was one alternative that was moved forward. We need to look at a bigger picture approach, and that would be your recommendation. So I do agree. If you have the data to support it, and we have information to be able to support specific recommendations, I think that's a great way to go as options. But then there's the financial component of if you can afford it. Good one is everybody wants underground utilities.
Yeah, I had that.
Prime topic. We do a streetscape project. Of course, we want to put utilities underground. If you have $5 or $6 million, we'd love to do that.
But ultimately, it saves you money over time.
So there's a study out there. It gets interesting because there is also a study out there from Hurricane Sandy and other locations that having underground utilities allows you to not have your facilities up and running faster than things above the water level. So now we're having this trend of to say if your utilities are underneath and you're underwater and you can't get access to fix them, the things that are above water are easier to fix because they're higher than the water table. So there's a lot of studies coming out right now that in engineering we're
heard
looking
that
at for over and under.
Well,
So who
you know,
would've thought?
I've seen that study as well with respect to Hurricane Sandy. But, you know, I will say that, you know, utilities underground has been something that I've been arguing for a long time.
Trees.
Primarily, I mean, I won't disagree that perhaps you can fix one that gets, you know, blown down in a heavy storm or something, or an ice storm, easier if it's above ground. But I am concerned about the incredible damage being done to our tree canopy. You know, I mean, it's shameful.
Right.
And, you know,
So it comes down to money. Honestly, I don't think it comes down to money. It's huge. It's 5 times the cost of a project, and then it comes down to politics, money, and budgets. That's literally what we're going through with 4 other towns right now.
maybe it's a relocation of overhead lines or
But
something.
it could be done in phases over time, and
And in engineering, it's literally cost. You know that with the streetscape projects, that's usually the number one thing of, do they want to do it? Because the other thing is, we put a hydrant in the middle of a sidewalk. We have a pole in the middle of a sidewalk, so we're going like this when we're walking too. So everybody would want that. But that's something, that is a goal in your comprehensive plan, for everything to be put underneath the streets, and then it's taken on a case-by-case basis. Yep.
There were also a significant number of comments about commercial deliveries and vehicles. I don't know if you saw those, but it was repeated throughout. There were safety concerns and convenience concerns, and there were a number of comments that said delivery vehicles should have to pull into the alleys, not on the main street.
we don't have very many.
We don't
It's-
We don't have
We
an
don't have
option
enough.
of pulling the
we have a few.
utilities through the alleys, you know, we just don't have that.
Do we
So,
have requirements that they come at certain hours overnight? or-
Well,
It's operational.
yeah, those are things that we have to get in there. The other issue that struck me is there were many more comments than I was expecting about a dog park. And just like Rachel mentioned earlier with, you know, having hyper knowledge about parking on her particular street. I live on Scarborough Avenue with the trees and the nice grass in the middle. Well, from my impression, I mean,
It's a dog park.
none of us, when we park on the opposite side of the street, nobody in my house has walked across that grass area in 30 years because Scarborough Avenue is the dog park. People drive from all over the city, because I know who they are. They drive over and they walk their dog. But of course, a dog park is recreation, not a place to walk the dog. So that's an issue that, you know, I think we should highlight, and then people who know more about it should decide, you know, whether that's something to pursue or what the issues
Or better
actually are.
signage in your area.
I think,
Yeah.
I think better signage, and
Absolutely.
maybe the little things with the poop bags, you know, dispenser.
And I hate
And that's
to
an
say that,
that's an enforcement matter
But
as well.
that's a best management practices for your sustainability, is actually if you were to do stormwater, to have the porta poop pots for the animals, there's funding to put those in and install them that they've got up and down the beach, because they do not want that into the water. So it's a good environmental practice, a good environmental item.
Debbie, I've got a more, I guess, practical question. I have the 2015 revised CDP, and I suspect that the one we're doing will probably be bigger than this, maybe?
I hope it's less.
I would probably say, I don't know the volume yet, but I feel that of all the comprehensive plans that I've been involved in, 15 of them now, that's probably the most visionary plan that I've seen, with just missing more on the implementation. So for me, it's not necessarily about volume, it's about content. I can fill it with census, I can fill it with workshops, I can fill it with pictures, I can fill it with maps, but I think it's the content. So we have some examples that we're gonna bring as we get closer to, because right now we're starting to write. We're starting to write certain things, we're starting to write surveys.
That was my
Yeah,
question.
so we're
'cause-
starting to write, it's just in a Word document, but how it flows, the best thing that we have found, and we'll bring that when we get closer to the chapter layout, kind of after our workshops, is we follow the structure of state planning. So the way they say what has to be in a code, we kind of follow that structure, because all the state agencies, the counties, and everybody look at that, and it's the bookends, executive summary, implementation in the back.
Your
everything-
company is starting to write that now,
Yeah, we actually, most of our clients have preferred to burn and start over.
and we have an extension till June 2020, is it, or?
Our first
Jan-
extension,
Is it June or January 31st?
we got 6 months.
6 months,
Yeah.
January 31st.
6 months, and then we can get another 6 months.
Okay, I just got scared if we're supposed to, you know, write this ourselves.
Oh, no, we start, so I'll give you just,
I
I
elected you, Barry, before you got here.
hope you really get your maps done soon. Yeah, exactly. You have the community character, congratulations. But we're starting, so we have, when what we try to do is, I really want to focus on these workshops and these contents so we can move forward. So we have a habit of talking so much about what we're going to do in the end, what we're going to do in the end, that I need to get forward to get closer to the end. So everything's a process. Like, this is probably one of the best workshops I've seen from the Planning Commission, because we took all of that survey, all of that data, everybody had input, everybody did their homework. And we've got some really good topics, but they're not 50, we don't have 50 topics. You know, there might be subtopics, don't get me wrong, but we can take this now and say, let's formulate some workshops, and let's get some subcategories, and let's get some experts in here. Let's look at some data. Let's find out how many renter licenses we have. Let's find out how many professional. Let's focus on those workshops, because we can talk about the bookends in this for every single meeting.
I wanted to ask a couple of questions because I'm sort of new to this. The prior planning commission did a lot of work on this, right?
Yes.
All right, so that's not being tossed out. That's something that we're building on, right?
Right, so we're taking the data, but there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of visionary, a lot of storytelling, probably more so. Was that probably?
I think that's
I don't want to
accurate.
offend anybody from before, but.
No, I think that's true.
Right, so we need more statistics and data as to why we're making our decisions and trends.
So from my perspective, just listening and having looked at that document, I would hope that we'd go more into the implementation alternative suggestions for the commissioners, because the vision is already pretty well laid out.
Well,
It needs to be fine-tuned, but it's laid out.
Your implementation section is normally under 5 pages.
Well,
It's your goals and objectives that get a little bit.
where I'm
meaty.
getting at is, I hope we don't prepare a document that looks like this, because it won't be read, even though we'll have an executive summary. I'm hoping we'll have a thinner document that has real substance in it and is not hundreds of pages long, because those things don't ever get looked at.
It will be at least 100 pages.
Well, 100
because of state requirements, but our first job is to meet the state requirement. That's the very first job, and that's the format of it. And then how elaborate you want to get on each, but I can tell you that the comprehensive plans we've written, each chapter is being used by different entities. We have churches and fire companies and emergency personnel that are using our chapters on the data. We have realtors using the data of what their trends are, what their population is, what the average
105
income that's coming in. So our census data is being used by everybody that has businesses, residential, reselling houses. What kind of services do you provide? It's actually a selling piece for Rehoboth, what's going on in Rehoboth, what makes it. But I think we're still so far away from getting into that. Is probably my best answer, because we'll bring you some examples. We've got 3 examples, really good examples, I think, that work on different levels. We can pull out pieces, but the format is still state-driven.
So Rick, share with us, or at least me, what were you not happy about with the work that's been done so far? What was its limitations, or what do you see as the fact that we needed another extension? Why?
Well, I think the reason why we needed another extension is because we didn't get as far along in the process as we should have, to be quite blunt about it. And
We don't need another extension, we just have one.
I'm hoping that we're not going to need
Yeah,
another
I
extension
understand,
beyond the 6 months.
I will tell you.
I mean,
we're gonna need
well, I really, I think, got Debbie upset the other day when I said to her, I'd like to see us finish this by the end of November.
What'd I
She said, oh, no way.
I said you will
That
have
would
to
be
have
great.
Well, you'll have to have a draft done to the state by the end of April or May. It's 4 to 6 months for the public comment review in the state. So that means we'll have workshops 1 month to get your draft done, and then send, and I know you're gonna want time with the draft.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
So,
4 to 6 months would be
yeah,
approval,
yeah,
probably, for the
yeah.
state.
And so a lot of our timing is dictated by how much time it's going to take the state and their review process and everything to get it done. I'm hoping, because I think we've got a terrific planning commission, that, we can get this done within the 1 6-month extension that we have. And that was certainly my goal, and I would hope it's everybody else's goal, to move in that direction.
You'll have a draft.
And, from my standpoint, I don't want to see us just redlining the existing CDP. I'm not saying it needs to be a total rewrite, but just doing a red line, in my view, is not going to serve our community well. And so, we need to take a fresh look and a fresh approach to this. I believe that we now have, the commission that, can reset, the timetable here and can get things moving forward in a more efficient manner than, has happened in the last year plus. And I guess maybe, I don't know, Debbie, is this a good time to
I was
bring
just
up?
gonna say, you just laid that up really well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back to a suggestion that I made at an earlier meeting, and that is, are you in favor of, or if not, do you have any other suggestions of each one of us taking responsibility for, a topic area? And, for example, if we want to have, want to do the connectivity, let's take connectivity as one, because that's been pretty well
We should
outlined.
take that, that's almost laid up pretty good.
Yeah. So whoever wants an easy topic to be the topic manager for, that's probably the one to take. But, my view was that if each one of us took one of these major topic areas and, helped one flesh out, the subcategories and took responsibility for, figuring out, for a workshop, for example, on connectivity, who are the participants? How is it going to be run? Hopefully, we'll be able to work with the city and utilize the convention center to the extent it's available, to set these things up, get the right parties in, set up booths and everything, and, also be sure, and this is one of the first things we're going to have to do, is, establish a schedule for these workshop meetings, get it into a schedule that is published. We get it out through, the city, email system and through Chris Johnson, get it publicized, and so that people know well in advance when these sessions are. And if we even have 2 sessions on a Saturday, for example, that one goes from 8 to 12 and the other one's from 1 to 5. And so people who are interested in what we're covering in the morning will come in the morning. People who are only interested in the afternoon will come in the afternoon. But I think the most efficient way for us to do this is if we would each be willing to take responsibility for a topic and work with Debbie, with me, whoever, and the city to put those together and then help, bring back to the full planning commission your findings for us to consider and then make a decision as to what we're going to do with those findings. That was just my idea. If anyone has any other suggestions, I would hope that, I don't know, Debbie, do you think that we have enough information for topic areas at this point?
I'm really happy if we went to, I'm gonna call it a captain or whatever, a captain type situation with the planning commission chair involved and vice chair, because sometimes you have what you call a think tank, where you get in there and you just talk about things and you work it out. We've had some really good think tanks with kind of approaches and things, and making sure that the planning commission is a part of something instead of me talking at you. You're talking, I'm taking notes, and my brain is thinking, how can I get the best product you have, or how do we articulate this to the public? So if we keep going like this, where everything has to go in front of a body every single time, we may as well add so much more to this. So I do think that it would be great to be able to hone in, because what that one person is going to learn, which is great, is resources, statistics, data, approaches. Us from a regional and statewide approach, because we've done this before. You from the localized knowledge, your background, why you built here, why you're here. Like you said, protect your investment. And I think we'd love that approach, because then, exactly like Rick said, we would like to be able to have the one sheet, the one flyer that shows all of our workshops. So let's just say we're going to run them in March or April, or whatever we come up with. Here's our workshops. Here's our 5 or 6 workshops. Here's the days. We've got the local bike shops going to come and do a demo. We've got people coming in. I think it's a great approach. It's where we started. But what I want to tell the Planning Commission really to sink in today is we're really where we needed to be at the 3rd meeting in February of last year. So those that are still here, this is your 3rd meeting in the process. What we got tonight is your 3rd meeting. So now we want to be organized, and now we want to stay on topic, and we want to keep going, because while we're working on these workshops, we say we want 6 workshops. What has to happen? Has anybody ever thrown a really good, successful party? It's that times 10. So we want to have a really good, successful party where everybody's involved, everybody's there, and we educate. So I think helping us get organized and having the captains would be great. And you might want to pick a topic you know nothing about as much as one you're very strong about, or maybe you're comfortable going with something you know more about. So it's a great learning curve.
So, I mean, I agree. I think this is a good approach if everyone else does. I feel like we need to summarize, right? What we
Absolutely.
think those topics or, categories will be.
Yep.
And I don't know if we can do that in the next 7 or 8
No.
minutes, or if you want
And
to,
I'll take a
if
stab
you want
at
to
it.
take a stab at
Yep.
it and send us an email, but I think let's
Why
forge
don't- why
ahead.
don't, if you think you have enough information from our discussion here today, which I think has been really good, to, identify the topic areas and send me an email that I'll get out to all the other members and, take a look at what Debbie produces and give me feedback as to what topics you might be willing to become the leader for. Because I think that if we can agree to that, certainly before our next meeting.
Yes.
I don't want, things to keep going only meeting to meeting, because we're never going to get anywhere. And so, I'd like to keep this process moving along as quickly as possible. Now, understand, because I see the look on Glenn's face, and it's sort of like, is he setting up subcommittees? No. And as I understand it, Glenn, you said it was fine for one person to be a topic leader, and they can talk to whomever they want to. There's no organized committees. They can talk to one or more individual planning commission members, or they can talk to people in the community, whatever, and then they can formulate their response to the entire planning commission.
All true, yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with what you want to do. What I was hoping is, and I certainly don't want to redline something, and, I just want it to be succinct. I want it to be easy to read, succinct, and clear.
And that's our job, and we will do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with
Yep.
you. And I hope that's the end product that we come out with. And, as someone mentioned earlier, I think maybe Mike or Lee, writing this thing by committee isn't going to work.
No, well,
So-
that never works.
No,
You
it
really
never
need
does.
to focus.
Yeah.
And we have a reputation with state planning as a model. So I'm probably less, and Glenn knows, I'm probably less worried about that side because we follow the state code first. However, how you lay it out, what we want to put into a content, definitely want the input. So I think an outline in the future, but right now, we keep going back to this. So I really need us to keep focusing on topics. We're not to the writing part of it yet, because we're behind the scenes starting to write information to figure out how to lay it out. We're still we got to get the workshops going, not what the book's going to look like. And we are taking information from the last book. It is not being burned, it's not useful, so we are taking pertinent data, historical data, and we're taking it and evolving it into the new one.
Would it be helpful to you, sorry, would it be helpful to you if we sent you an email, our topic themes that you asked us to summarize, so that you have them? I mean, we've talked through some of them, but we may not have hit
Do
all
we
of
have
them.
any more that we would have tonight? Because I was just leaving with the list tonight. Do we have any more to discuss? Because that's important.
Yeah, I was just going to send you my sheet and a half with my
Because
topics.
what
if
I
you'd
was
like
getting
them.
out of was 9 different responses and going through them again.
I had, I covered each of the topics. I sent it in. I don't know if you want to
No,
just
I
let her
couldn't
have that.
open it.
Oh, you couldn't open
There's
it.
6, I wrote them down.
No, but I have, that was just under areas of concern. I have, city operational. I mean,
Right.
if I can have an email,
Send 'em in.
I'll,
Why don't
I
you send
think
them in?
that's a good
Yeah,
idea.
that'd be good.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then I'll categorize each one of them on 1 through 5.
Yep.
And then we'll go through and see if they fall as subtopics, probably on some of these other ones. Okay, yep, that's good. I totally defaulted on the rest of your homework.
No, it's
We
okay.
got through
It's
number
fine,
1.
But we summarized it, so
Right.
it might be easier for you.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to run through the project scope real quick. Is that okay, like some of the
Yes. Yep.
changes?
Yep.
We're still to 4 phases in our scope. As you know, I've alluded to this last year, we'll change the scope, change the scope, change the scope. This is very welcoming because we're getting feedback and everybody's bringing a different thing to the table, and I love it. I love input. So what we've actually talked about doing is the items in red are actually items that we'd like to add to the scope. So I have had to submit a budget number today to Sharon to ask for additional funding, which is being unwritten, which is being verbally discussed as something that the commissioners are entertaining. Because they know where we're at, they know what's happened this last year, they know the new leadership. I can tell you, everybody, we can say hi. There's 2 commissioners that are listening and that watch that have told me. So workshop topic organizational meetings. We felt this is important. We'd like to budget for 6 of those. So it could be 4, it could be 5, but as we go through, we're going to find out how we fit those topics. We need to maximize, like Rick was saying, maximize a day. Do a morning and an afternoon, subtopics, maximize that time. it's going to be some of the same audience. So let's not have them go to multiple different things if we can get it. Workshop events is 6. So those workshop topic meetings are with the captains, whatever word we're coming up with. Those are captain strategy meetings. The workshop events take a lot of time, take a lot of facility. We have to get with the city staff. Sometimes they are not available, usually 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, I gotta stay away from. So workshop events will help us out with getting places like the convention center, et cetera, or the YMCA, or different arenas that we can look at. And then the monthly planning commission meetings, we talked about one thing that's very hard as a consultant is if you have it on the agenda to talk about the comprehensive plan, and I'm not here just to hear, even if I don't have to speak or present. I don't have to present every meeting, but I need to hear what you don't like about site plans you're hearing. I need to hear about issues that you have as things progress and go through that. I need to be that learning person and that voice to carry it out throughout the document of things I'm hearing you go through with your meetings. So we're scheduling for me to attend the 9 monthly PC meetings. Will take us through December, and we'll provide updates. Because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. Right now, we're almost done with all of your mapping. Well, I think it's 9 to 12 maps. So that's behind the scenes, we're still doing stuff. I'm not waiting for your next meeting. So there's a lot of stuff we're still doing to get this right. And they're static maps. I'm not changing anything. You're not gonna change the sea level rise data. You're not gonna change who owns what roads. So these are static maps. The land use we will have discussions on. So land use is big and zoning is big, and that'll be a separate workshop. So these were ones we wanted to add in to say, we're really, really close before we get to a document format discussion. So literally, we have, what do we have, 15, 12, 9 meetings before we get to the document format discussion. So we're just typing in Word. We're putting the charts, the data, the census, the stuff you saw almost a year ago. We're putting that together. But how it flows, we want to talk about the format. So we'll bring you an outline. We'll bring you a chapter, the sub-chapters, and see if you like the way the flow goes. So we have that as a meeting. Goals and policies as a meeting. And that could turn into more than 1 or 2. The document input, depending on how we do it. Is everybody going to redline it? This is the biggest planning commission that we serve. They are 7 members and below, 7 and 5 in most jurisdictions. So this is the largest group that we have in planning commissions. So getting 9 redline documents, we have to have a funnel system. We have to figure out how we're going to get the comments, kind of like how we all had to just read the surveys. We're going to figure out how to make that as painless as possible for all parties. So how do we get the feedback? Then we have an internal staff meeting, which we'll talk about like direction. And then what happens is you have 2 internal document meetings. So by internal, by Freedom of Information Act, anybody can come and FOIA the document. We stamp it an internal document, meaning it's not ready for public release. The public can obtain it, but it's not ready for public comment yet. So before we let the cow out of the gate, as I would say, we want to have this internal document and be able to work on it and fine tune it, where we all feel it's blessed to the best of our ability to send and present to the commissioners and to the state for review. Now, that's not the last time you see it, because then we have public comment. We have people that come in and do verbal comments written. We take the written comments, we funnel them, we respond. Most of our towns, I get anywhere from 1 comment to 50. And we ask them what page it is or what concern you have, and then we address it. We bring recommendations back for your consideration or input that you have on it. So they're all recorded, so that helps. We get the plus comments from the state, because Big Brother is going to come in and say if you meet it or not, you have the sniff test or what you're doing right and wrong. And then we have the public hearing, which could be joint. So this will get a little bit further on, but the Planning Commission has to adopt the recommendation for adoption to go to the council. So sometimes you want both bodies at the public hearing as a joint meeting, because you've been working on it so long, you're eating it, you're breathing it, you're drinking it, and maybe the commissioners have seen it twice. So they haven't been privileged to maybe be at every single meeting and really talk these things out. So sometimes doing the joint allows for that open, upfront dialogue versus a political swing by other parties, not the commissioners, but other people doing political swings at the end and redoing some of the things you've done. So to get a lot of parties on board, we recommend joint meetings. So this is what we've got in the budget. This is what we submitted to Sharon. This is our new allowance, I guess is the easy way to say. And it's got a lot of meetings. So we're going to end up doing more meetings than the last comprehensive plan you did was 22. So we're going to end up with more, but you also have a larger community outreach component on specific topics, which I think is time for Rehoboth to do based on the trends and the changes that have happened in Rehoboth. So I think it's a great time to finish up that education and outreach. And the more we can tell the public what has been done, what has transpired, what you can and can't do in jurisdiction, the better some of those comments the next round might be. Because I don't think they're that bad. I've taken some really wicked surveys, so I think you're sitting pretty well. Okay, so there's a lot happening behind the scenes. Like I said, we're 90% done with the maps. We're always looking at things. I just got the housing data from the county. That was a 250-page report. I just finished reading that last week because we like to see how it's going to impact our clients. Does it affect you at all? Workforce housing is a big thing in there. Subsidized housing is a big thing. And they're trying to do it with tax credits and implementation. Not all communities are embracing it. So you're going to have a workforce, affordable housing component. It's going to be required. So with the project reset, I just kind of put that, I want to go over we're going to meet with the Planning Commission chair and the vice chair. I can tell you that meeting has helped me a lot in what the expectations are of the next meeting. And it's helped us be on the same team. It's helped us talk through things. You learn a lot about each other, and I need the local flavor on what needs to be done or lessons learned, and I can bring in some standard formatting. Then meeting monthly with the Planning Commission I think will help. We're attached at the hip for a year. We do not want to fail. I've been here for a long time. We don't want to fail, so we will definitely make sure we're hopefully successful with your knowledge and input. Workshop topic organization is our next step. The coordination and execution of that is important. It's rolling out a campaign as if you're an elected official going for presidency. We got to roll that out and organize it, and the staff's really good at that if we actually allow them to do their job. And monitor and update the data collection, so that's continual. And that was it, my easy presentation tonight. But I can tell you that this makes me really happy that the dialogue, the different thoughts and processes, that helps out. I can't even tell you that we are literally on the third meeting on the reset, which is nice because now we have direction to go forward. And that everybody did their homework. Nobody got called out. Any questions, concerns?
Any other comments?
No,
Mike, you
there's
wanted to
one
say
comment to Steve's point. And Debbie, with Sussex County, the previous comprehensive plan, actually the two previous comprehensive plans that Sussex County did weren't worth the powder to blow them to hell. And they specifically did it that way. The commissioners created a comprehensive plan that would essentially allow Sussex County to do more or less whatever the hell they felt like. And particularly with regard to DelDOT. I just happen to have some experience there because I was director of planning for a while. They didn't want to hear anything. They wanted to do their own thing. And in doing their own thing, by not doing well-known land use practices that have been known for 50 years, you see the problems we have. And now the latest round, and Mr. Burton has really been on the forefront of this in Sussex County as a commissioner, trying to get things changed at all levels to try to bring to a halt the unbridled development that has occurred and the negative impacts of that. So that's sort of the perspective now that we have the county finally taking some steps. And in our own comprehensive plan, up until just a few years ago, although it was a state mandated requirement and we created one, and I was on the commission for the last one that we did, the update. We were very passionate about it. But previous, there wasn't a lot of passion on the commissioners here to really do a lot of the things that we recommended. And that seems to be changing at the current time, which I think is very healthy. But there are some sort of landmines that you don't know about. And when you were talking about underground utilities, there's a recent federal declaration, report and order from the Federal Communications Commission, and we're going to be impacted by it. Even if you have underground utilities, they can put above ground utilities because they've declared it a critical infrastructure. So for example, right now, and I know that the city is starting to deal with it, is the infrastructure providers from the phone companies want to put more 5G equipment in our area because it's critical infrastructure, and many of the things that we previously would like to do and required in terms of the pathways and the time that you need to take it, they get to roll over all of that. And so, and there's been a whole bunch of cases now, and there's now more, I don't know if there's being lawsuits filed or the people
Yes.
are out of luck, but there's some very good cases where people have underground utilities and suddenly in the front of their house, because it's in the right of way, they have a 60-foot pole. and there's not a damn thing they can do about it.
The flip side of that, you brought up a really good point, is you can, if you have design standards in place, which you brought an expert in from Pennsylvania, if you have design standards in place, you can regulate the design standards. But I can also tell you the flip side of that is, if you look at the Ocean City statistics and you've been paying attention to them, for them to run 5G under their boardwalk, their police department doesn't have dead zones anymore. The ambulance and the police had to drive to answer to their phone calls on their cell phone. So there's no more dead spots. They've got statistics on the crime on the beach and the boardwalk.
Right.
They've got the cameras on there that look like light poles. They got the aesthetically pleasing light. So there's, when you talk about technology, there's a pro and a con to it, but there's also, like you said, getting ahead of it. There's so many things that we have to track from, they're running fiber right now in Europe in sewer lines. Nobody in the United States wants to do that. So wait, impervious surface coverage. Everybody wants where asphalt can be porous. Do you know that you have to have a street sweeper and you have to suck substances out of it? It's expensive and you have to maintain it. So everything constantly changes with technology and trends, but so do pricing and maintenance. So you got a great environmental friendly, great, we're going green here, but it costs you 3 times the amount of money, and then you can't maintain it. So like you said, Steve, too, is the resources. So there's constantly trends that we have to track. We use our state resources, we use the DOT. The bridge that they're redoing in Baltimore that allows the 2 containers to go through, the 2 storage containers that they're redoing the bridge, that is having a huge impact on the eastern shore of Maryland, which is going to have a huge impact in Delaware to do the barges. So there's a lot of things that happen around you that could have a big impact on economic development, transportation. So following all this is very interesting because it touches everything and you have to stay on top. So the data we're collecting is huge, way past just Delaware. It's how it's going to affect you, like you said, around you. And state planning does a great job on an annual report. DELDOT's doing a great job. Your MPOs are doing a great job. Things have elevated to a professional level in government that I think you didn't have before. You have, in Sussex County, you have a whole staff of planners. Janelle came from Kent County. I've known her for years in the city of Dover. She's got a whole bunch of staff members in there now that their first thing they rolled out was a 100-foot buffer. And that's very controversial. It's very, very political. Newcastle's had it higher than that for years. So it's just these changes are evolving. So things are now being constrained that maybe could have been constrained 20 years ago. So you're seeing a lot of changes. You're seeing professionalism, good old boys social, it's kind of going away.
Unfortunately, the cat got out of the bag with what's been happened, and we're stuck with it. But you're right, it's really dramatic, and I was impressed with the current round with it. It was so different from the previous 2 plans. It was just night and day.
They had public workshops.
It was almost incomprehensible to think that a county as large as Sussex could be that backward previously, but they were.
Or that DELDOT is
DELDOT
willing.
as well.
DELDOT is willing to work with the county and the town on transportation. So that's huge because everybody went like this. Not our road, have no say on it. That's not necessarily the truth. Now we're doing traffic impact study areas. There's all sorts of different trends and better planning that's going on. So I think that's a good embracement for Rehoboth that'll help.
In 45 years of practicing law, one thing I learned fairly early, you cannot stop growth. It isn't the growth, it's how you deal with the growth.
Yep.
And so we need to realize that even if you could stop growth for some period of time, what happens, eventually the dam bursts and it's much worse than it would have been. So you just have to deal with it in a way where you can manage it. And that's what we need to do.
And I think it's great because there's a perception that I hear where my little blinders go up. Like I've met with the departments where I hear the police department is not managing large events. Oh, well, that's one of the first things we brought up. Do you know how many resources they bring in here for events? Do you know how many police you see at your large events? So there is a contingency plan, there's an evacuation plan, where's the statistics to say it's not enough? Where's the statistics to say you need more? So to educate us, it's great because we can say, there is not one of the challenges we have that you'll find out is police departments usually take anywhere from 50 to 60% of every budget. They're even getting higher of municipal budgets. The part that we run into with the police departments are, as your capital grows, there isn't a set number of how many employees you have. So for every 1,000 people that come to a community, it doesn't say you need 3 police officers. It has to go on demographics, population, services, income, education. So there's not a rationale. Just like public works, the people that are picking up the trash or outsourcing it or recycling, there is no metrics that people can develop because of all the variables to say, as you get 500 people, This is how many city managers you need, how many staff members you need. Who needs a public information officer? Rehoboth. Everybody wants to know. Everybody wants it transparent. Everybody wants all the information to obtain when they want it available. So there's not a metrics on that. So we're tracking that as well to say, especially in the public works and services industry, we're tracking, is there anything that tells us on peak season what the magic sweet number is that would allow you to do everything, and then collect the taxes, the revenues, the licensing, the fees to cover that. There's a lot of different stuff out there for that, so that's constantly being looked at by all industry leaders. I would love to have just a straight answer, but there's too many variables. I can't even get the towns to agree on impact fees because there's variables and building permits, so. There's a lot of things to consider, but there's a lot more data than your last round that's available.
Oh, yeah, yeah, dramatically.
Yep.
Are there any other comments on the CDP? Okay, moving on to the next topic, which always seems to fall victim to the CDP. We had consideration of and possible vote on proposed changes to the Planning Commission bylaws and rules of procedure. Given the hour, I think once again it's going to fall victim, unfortunately. Maybe we should think about scheduling it as the first agenda item at some point.
Before you go that far, does anyone disagree with what's been structured, or has not everyone read what was done?
I don't know if everyone's had an opportunity to really read what was put forth, and Steve had made some additional suggestions about combining the bylaws and the policies and procedures into one document. And Lee, brought up a topic with me yesterday that I think a lot of us have been thinking about, given our experiences, with some recent sketch review plans. And Lee, do you want to say a few words about it?
Sure, I'll just quickly. The issue I was thinking about is, and this will be new to some of the new Planning Commission members, but in the recent past, we had some sketch plan reviews come before us, which is the kind of the first step of the site plan review process. And some of the plans were pretty far out of compliance with the current zoning ordinance. And we got into this kind of quandary where we didn't know exactly how to handle it because the applicants were thinking that they may address these discrepancies through the variance process, and they would go to the Board of Adjustment. And they even, to some extent, were hoping that maybe the Planning Commission would support their applications with those variances. And, we had that one meeting with the Bellhaven Hotel folks where at the end of the meeting, they looked at us and said, what do we do? And we went, beats us,
Just the one with the FAR issue?
It was a number of
Well, it was a
issues. It
number
was
of
height, FAR, number of
Okay.
stories. It was a lot of things. And it was always kind of our perception or our understanding that, at least in the sketch plan review process, that you would be pretty tight to code and that there might be a few minor discrepancies and those may or may not be addressed by the Board of Adjustment. But it certainly wasn't our understanding that there would be such a broad variance from code. And so I just brought it up to put it on the agenda to be something we can get in front of so that if and when it comes up again, we can handle it a little better than we did at the time. Because we just didn't know how to deal with it.
So the sketch plan where you vest your rights, is that where you initially?
The sketch plan is kind of a preliminary, there's the final site plan, and the sketch plan is
Yeah.
a preliminary review of
It's
that.
usually where you sort of vest your basic rights at the sketch plan, and then the site plan is a much more detailed plan, is that?
No, I don't think there are any rights
So-
vested.
So in this,
It's out in your code very well.
yeah, so in this case, it's not even a formal submission, the sketch plan, it's
Oh,
really,
okay.
it's really identified as an informal discussion with the planning
So
commission
it's a
about what you might
discussion
want to
item where
do.
you have feedback one way or the
Have a
other.
complimentary review to flesh out any
Right.
major issues or anything
So it's not
like
a,
that.
it's not a preliminary approval or anything like that, it's a very basic discussion.
So Glenn, when do you vest yourself, at preliminary plan approval or at site plan approval?
I don't like to make a rigid determination of that because there's always a developer who's going to argue something happened at some point. And then they're
Well,
gonna
what's
go back and
our
find a notice, but
interpretation of it?
Generally, it's at preliminary plan approval.
Which is a subdivision plan. Is that a, no, not,
But when you say vest, I'd like to be very clear about that, because preliminary is the ability to, you have said, this plan is good, but you have to go to several outside agencies that could change things.
usually
So
it's,
you get
usually,
some kind of right to move forward, where they
That's
feel
right.
comfortable to invest more money.
maybe that was the wrong term to use. Usually you don't vest yourself till you have final sketch plan approval. Is that,
Final is done.
yeah, okay.
But they have so many agencies they may have to go through that you might not have control over.
Right. As I, read the code, I mean, the sketch plan review process is an informal process, but it is clear in the code that as part of that process, the planning commission is supposed to provide the applicant with written comments and recommendations as to, how they could improve or deal with some issues that the planning commission identifies at that level. And correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, but it's only once they get the site plan filed and everybody's signed off on it, the building inspector and the other departments and all, that's where their final approval comes in.
That's final approval. So in Delaware, when you talk about vesting of rights, though, and I know you've done this kind of work before, in Delaware, it used to be a test that was called a permit plus. If you had a permit to do something and you took some activity
You put something in the ground.
That's right.
Yeah,
but
that's same
currently,
as
though,
Maryland.
the law currently, though, in Delaware, it's a fact-intensive analysis based upon good faith reliance on existing standards. So if a developer looked at the standards that are in the code and in good faith relied upon them, at some point the court says you've spent enough money, you've invested enough time, but there is no hard and fast rule as exactly when that happens, the vesting process.
I
One
think the
improvement
sketch
you
plan,
could,
I'm sorry, I think the sketch plan review is also to help the applicant get some
Yeah,
direction without
formulate.
spending a fortune on it in plans and so on and so forth. They kind
Right.
of give you a preliminary plan to look at and go, do you have any major issues with this?
Right. The other part is,
Yeah.
also beyond that, is actually assuming this body has seen other plans come through and other things that they wanted to do, and with some reasonable understanding of the code. In the case of the Avenue Inn, which was done several years ago, they came in with a design that they wanted to develop. And everyone looked at it in the context of the comprehensive plan. It talked about the redevelopment of that area. And had they done their plan, you would not see the hotel that currently exists, the Avenue Inn, because they had modified certain parts of the structure to meet code. But the damn things were ugly. It really did not blend in and lead to the redevelopment of the area. And so this committee made a recommendation, well, if you did this, it does require a variance, but we could support that because it made sense.
Do we have the right to waive certain sections?
No, we don't waive it. We say, we recommend, and they could go in with essentially the force and effect of the Planning Commission when they go to the Board of Variance, saying, the Planning Commission actually would prefer it, and I think, I don't know, I think you signed, David signed off, and said, the Planning Commission said, we support your request for a variance to do this because it will improve the community and improve the redevelopment of that area.
Well, one of the
So
things,
that's what this was intended to be,
got
but we didn't realize it was
Yeah,
a skyrocket.
Yeah, and I think it's now, maybe it's grown a little bit out of that where now it's kind of like the sky's the limit as far as what you can ask for.
I
at the-
think
at
one of the
Board
things you could do
Adjustment.
too is, you could talk to the administration, meaning you're new, because Dom is out, and there's some promotions happening in the building licensing department, and Sharon to talk about a gatekeeper process. Meaning, is this meeting the snifter test with the city staff doing as much as possible on direction? So if you don't have a planner on staff or an engineer, you should be able to get staff reports when you get something for recommendations. So there's actually like a pre-qualification, there's usually a pre-development meeting with a developer to say, you know what, you want this variance, okay, this is that process, you want to come to the planning commission. So it's kind of like you're pre-qualing it to get it eligible for the planning commission to have everything you need to make the decisions. Meaning the checklist is there, the path is forward, there's a list of variances versus just talking about it. So you get the bigger picture, but you're better prepared. So I call it the administrative gatekeeper. that kind of lays it up a little bit better for the planning commission. I think that step could probably be improved.
That's, honestly, I mean, in business, that's something we do all the time. So we have different people that are responsible for architecting or engineering or connectivity in our world. And then we have what we call a deal review board, where the executives come to the table, we review everyone's piece around this project. We're told what the exceptions are, what the concerns are, what potential risks are, and then we have to make those decisions and then decide if we want to move forward with an approval or if they have to go back and do some more work and come back before us. So that's a normal process in business.
And in this preliminary, I mean, these were some of my first experiences too. Bellhaven is a very large redevelopment project. And I think setting an expectation of what we do in sketch review will help address some of Lee's concerns, because we were sort of in an open-end do-over loop. You know, if we set an expectation that, you know, a developer wants to have many components, I'm just saying in the future, if they want to have maybe a few affordable housing units, and they want to have some public space, and maybe they want to have some private rentable space, and if they want to have all these features, but they don't know how to weigh which one is important to the community and what might contribute to a redevelopment zone like Wilmington Avenue. And, you know, they bring it all to us. And if our expectation was we would help them sort through the semi-public process here to allow them to make choices to eventually get to a code compliant or nearly code compliant, I think that would be much more helpful than what we did there, because each time they came back, we have option 2, option 3, option 4, and they were all bigger and grander than the ones before. We were going in the opposite direction.
And to your point, what's very important, and Steve, you brought up, the comprehensive plan was what we used on the basis for making the recommendation for a variance for the Avenue Hotel. And the opposite occurred when the Bellhaven came in, because many components were so far off the chart that nothing was complementary to the comprehensive plan. It was the antithesis of the comprehensive plan. And we said, whoa, how can we go forward?
The reason I'm asking these questions, I'd like ultimately the city to get away from so many variances. I mean, variances technically, legally, are just for undue hardship.
Right.
You know, so you need a better pathway to get to what's acceptable from a design and code compliance. And the other problem with variances is you end up with the wild, wild west, because, you know, there's nothing that's controlling. It's just a question of, do we like this? And are we going to give it a pass? So I realize a lot of it has to do with the codes we currently have. But, you know, technically variances really shouldn't be applied unless it's a real undue hardship. I mean, that's the technical, legal.
Well, the flip side of that is, if the code is not keeping up with the trends and the changes and updates versus every 20 years. I mean, we still have probably a spot in some of our communities where you can park the horse and the buggy, and its stall is this big. So if you're not keeping up with your code, there is a hardship in trend because somebody has not kept up with the industry standards or the trends.
I'm sure you could make an argument. What I'm trying to say is that there's probably a better way.
Yes,
Oh,
here
absolutely.
in the city,
Yeah.
you know, there's no such thing as a special use permit, a special exception, or any of the things we're used to hearing. You and I might be used to hearing. I mean, it's the code is the code,
Yeah.
and that's it. And there's the rezonings are once in a blue moon. I mean, they're not very often. So it's really kind of, it is what it is, and that's
Yeah,
it.
well,
And
well,
there's
that's the
no-
custom and usage in the city is what you're
Yeah.
saying, and that's what we've always done.
And so
Nothing
there's
wrong with
always
that.
been the Board of Adjustment, which started as, you know, exceptional practical difficulties, but now is moving a little bit more into where people are asking for
Right.
more and more
Right.
The
as
other
a
trend-
way to have some flexibility.
The other
but-
trend you're seeing is, we just wrote, for anybody familiar with like Port Deposit, Maryland, we just wrote a code where, if you're familiar with the Port Deposit Bainbridge, the old Navy Yard on the top of the cliff, it's huge. I mean, it's 75% of the town's land use, and we're writing a zoning code for industrial. So without knowing the uses, you're now changing the whole, you know, it's 75% of the town. You could change the whole character of that by warehouses that are, you know, large tracts, bigger than almost your mile of your town. So the way that it was written in the code was, we did not want to come in and say, this is the specific buffers, because your site restricted so much environmentally and several things. We gave some of the powers back to the Planning Commission. So your code does not allow for a lot of flexibility with the Planning Commission site-specific. It's either it's this or you're going for a Board of Adjustment. So now the code trends are, we are going to have you do landscaping to this degree if you can't meet it or other materials as approved by the Planning Commission. It's subjectivity, however, it's problem solving that's within the site plan, not the hardship. So you're seeing codes go a little bit more to the flexibility going to the Planning Commission on certain things, and that's
Conditions of
helpful.
approval.
Yep, and that's very helpful that we're seeing the trend. That's the way we'd probably talk to Glenn to say certain things like landscaping hardships. Well, what if they're doing something else that is offsetting it so much better than the landscaping requirements? Or what if they can't for some reason, but they're going to do something else? So open to suggestion and trends gives you a little bit more flexibility in the site plan. I think you'll see your code going to some of those trends potentially versus can't follow an outdated code, got to go into variance.
Yeah, I certainly want to see us do whatever we can to reduce the number of variances that are being sought. And it's why, from my perspective, I would much rather see, developers, applicants coming before the Planning Commission first and not running off to the Board of Adjustment, seeking variances, and then hamstringing us, quite frankly, because then they come in here and say, oh, well, I got a variance. And yet what they got a variance for may be totally, as Mike said, inconsistent with exactly what the CDP says. And so, I think people need to realize, and I've told a couple of potential, people who are planning on making submissions, I said, don't be running off to the Board of Adjustment first. Our preference is to see you come before the Planning Commission first. And, to the extent that that's an area of the code that needs to be addressed as well, to make it clearer, then I think that's something that should be addressed.
The issues you're talking about can be addressed by the change of the bylaws? It doesn't seem so.
No.
It has to be, that's a code
Glenn, I
change.
think that's going to be a code change, right?
We may have to
So
take out
what
of.
changes of the bylaws are we talking about that are,
Well,
that-
yeah, they go back a few months now. We overcame one of them when it came to election of officers. I think what I would suggest with respect to the bylaws and policies and procedures, just to move this along, is that I will do a redraft and take into consideration all of the comments that I've received. And
You have my comments.
Yes, I do.
I only wanted to give you one more. I would add a addendum where you start where I make a suggestion where you start the procedures. The addendum would address the sections that are not included here, which is the policies and procedures where you have the voting, this section here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would put those in as an addendum at the back.
Okay.
Okay, and then, whatever you come up with, Rick, is fine with me,
Yeah, I'll get something prepared before the next meeting and get that circulated and put it back on the agenda and for the next meeting, hopefully. That finishes that report on new applications. And I understand we don't have any that have been submitted at this point. Okay, Ann did tell me that there is one that may be coming back to us in January, but nothing has been filed yet. Future planning, building inspector is not here, city solicitor report.
The only thing I will mention to you, because Bellhaven came up, is I know the city manager has worked somewhat with the Papa Johns to bring on another consultant who's going to assist a bit with some floodplain issues and hopefully resolve some of that or work through it to bring something back to you. So I know that process hasn't died. It's moving forward.
Am I, Glenn, maybe, I don't know if you know this or not, am I wrong? I thought someone told me that they had solved the flood issue with respect to the height.
I've heard the same thing. I haven't seen a plan. So I don't think anything's been submitted to the city that reflects that, but I've heard the same rumors. Until we see something, it's not resolved yet.
Okay, all right, thanks. Future Planning Commission meetings, we have one regular meeting scheduled on January 10th. I suspect we'll
Around the corner, isn't it?
be back with the CDP and probably bylaws and any other suggestions from the members for agenda items.
Not that, I just will not be here in February for the
Won't
February.
be here for the February meeting.
Oh, that's
Okay.
when we're going over the whole document.
I guess I'll miss it.
Well, no, that's when we assign the portions to people who aren't here.
Steve, did you say you wanted transportation?
I'll take whatever you want to give me, I'll take.
Parking?
Whatever you give me, I'll do.
Any other suggestions for the February meeting?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, other than Steve won't be here in February, anyone else know if they have any conflicts?
Nope.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Taking my grandchildren on a Disney,
For you.
what do you call it, cruise.
I think we should go and learn about the transportation of the boat.
Yeah.
We'll speak with Sharon about that, see if she'll.
Put a
fund that.
monorail.
Yeah.
In that case, do I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion, is there a
So
second?
moved.
Does it have a
So
second?
moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried, meeting's closed. Well done. I learned a lot how to use one of these, just watching the hearings lately.